Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto looks like Kushina and acts like Minato part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Naruto. A calm voice called. Yes, father. A small voice replied. The 5-year-old Naruto sat cross-legged on a brown couch with his back towards the kitchen. To the boy's right was a small dining room with a square table and 4 green chairs. Behind him was a small standard kitchen. Across was another couch and a bookshelf behind that. Naruto had an unrolled scroll in his lap. Minato appeared from the kitchen wearing a pink apron over his standard shinobi uniform, holding a plate he was drying with a small dish rag. The elder blonde cocked his head at the scroll his son was reading and walked over after setting down the plate and rag on the counter. He stood over his son. "What have I told you about going into my library?" Minato asked. "No, father. I didn't go to your library. I found a scroll in my room," Naruto explained without looking up. "In your room?" Minato sat beside his son. He picked up the end of the scroll and started reading. "It's from Mom," Naruto whispered. In his mind, Minato agreed that the scroll was Kushina's handwriting. He momentarily wondered when Kushina had written it. "May I?" Minato asked, and when Naruto nodded, he pulled the scroll into his lap to continue reading it. "My dearest Naruto. If you are reading this, something has happened to me and your father. There are several things I want you to know. The first is that we love you very much. The second is to never give up on your dreams. Your father's dream of becoming Hokage came true, yours can too. When you are older, ask the current Hokage for information on your parents, especially me. I don't know how old you will be when you read this, but I assume you are too young to know many things about me. If your father is still alive, he will explain why I have moved on to the next world. I do hope that your father is still alive. A young boy needs his father. There are several scrolls I have written for you about my past and your father's, in case anything ever happens to me. They are stored in a small scroll in your father's library. Your father, the current Hokage, can retrieve them for you. Naruto, I love you very much. Your loving mother. Kushina." Minato blinked at the scroll. He read it repeatedly, and after a few minutes, he looked at his son. Naruto gave him a worried look, which he returned with a smile. "Naruto, how much do you know about your mother?" Minato asked, handing back the scroll. "Not very much, father." Naruto shook his head as he pulled the scroll into his lap. "Just what you have told me." "I see." Minato pulled his son into his lap so the little blonde sat across his knees. Naruto looked up at his father. "He looks so much like Kushina but acts too much like me. Your mother was the most beautiful woman in the village. She was a little rowdy at times but very loving. She loved you so much." Minato smiled at his son. "What happened to mother?" Naruto asked. Minato sighed. He knew Naruto was too young to understand what happened that night. He was also too young to know about the Kyuubi. He would explain everything to Naruto one day, but now was not the time. "I'm sorry, Naruto." Minato shook his head. "You're a little young to understand. I promise that when you are older, I will explain everything." For Naruto's age, he was surprisingly quiet and mature. He understood that his father thought he was too young, so he didn't protest. Naruto just nodded in agreement, surprising Minato. Still sitting on his father's lap, he pulled the scroll over and re-rolled it. They sat there for a long time until Naruto finally hopped down. "What's for dinner?" Naruto asked quietly. "Your favorite," Minato replied, standing up. The older blonde grabbed Naruto's hand and walked him into the kitchen. "Ramen?" Naruto's eyes brightened as he walked into the kitchen and smelled the ramen cooking. Although Naruto was mature for his age, he was still quite simple-minded sometimes. "Yes, your mom's famous recipe." Minato smiled at his son. The following day, Naruto sat cross-legged with another scroll in his lap in his father's office. He was reading something about chakra nature. He was usually so quiet that most didn't even notice him or chose to ignore him. Minato sat at his desk, doing the typical paperwork quietly. After a while, Minato looked up at his son and frowned. A young boy his age shouldn't want to sit and read constantly. Minato shook his head. Even when he was young, he still wanted to go and play with the others his age. "Naruto. Why don't you go outside and play with your friends?" Minato asked. Naruto looked up from the scroll and said, "I don't have any friends." "What about Kiba? Shikamaru? Choji? Sasuke?" Minato questioned. "I don't know. They used to play with me, and now they don't." Naruto shrugged. "Did something happen?" Minato cocked his head. "I don't think so," Naruto replied. "Maybe I'll ask Shikakura soon what's going on," Minato told himself. "Please don't, father," Naruto said. Why?" Minato asked. "I can make new friends, father," Naruto lied. "Alright, then." Minato nodded and returned to his paperwork. Naruto went back to reading the scroll. Occasionally, Minato would glance up at his son, still worried about the young boy. Several hours passed, and Naruto would exchange the scroll for a new one now and then, checking first with his father to ensure he could read those scrolls. The young boy still sat in the same position. "Father?" Naruto asked. Minato looked up at his son, "Yes. Why am I named Uzumaki and you Namikaze?" Naruto asked. Minato blinked at his son, he didn't think Naruto would notice yet. Minato smiled and motioned for his son to come over. The little one did as he was told and trotted to his father. Minato helped his son onto his lap. "I didn't think you would notice just yet," Minato admitted, "but your mother thought it was a good idea for you to be named after her and not me." "Why?" Naruto blinked, confused. "Because many people and shinobi are out there who don't like me and would want to hurt me. There aren't a lot of Namikazes in the world. If you were a Namikaze, many of my enemies would come after you to get to me," Minato explained. Naruto nodded, "Oh. But when you are older and able to defend yourself properly, you can change your name to Namikaze if you would like." Minato smiled and brushed a few strands of hair out of Naruto's face. Naruto smiled and nodded again. Minato brushed a few more strands of hair from Naruto's face and laughed, "You did get my unmanageable hair, you need a haircut." Naruto's eyes widened and both hands flew up to his hair, making Minato laugh even more. Naruto jumped down from his father's lap and ran to the door. However, he wasn't very fast. Minato came up behind the little blonde and scooped him up in his arms, both still laughing. Minato had stopped laughing before his son. It was a joy to Minato to watch his son laugh so carefree. He noticed that Naruto laughed just like Kushina. "Naruto?" Minato asked, pulling Naruto out of his laughing fit. "Yes." Naruto replied. "Would you like me to enroll you in the academy?" Minato asked, "You are the right age." Naruto's eyes widened and a large grin spread across his face, "Yes." Minato chuckled at Naruto's enthusiasm, "Alright then. You can start this upcoming year." Naruto's grin grew and he threw his hands around his father's neck, "Thank you, Tusan." "Tusan? I didn't get your call Tusan. Usually, it's father or Tausen. Why the sudden change?" Minato laughed. Naruto pulled back and looked at his father with his arms still around his neck. He honestly couldn't think of why, so he just shrugged. Minato smiled gently at the boy, "You don't have to be so formal with me, you know." Naruto only smiled in response. 6 years later. "Naruto?" Haruka yelled as he chased a blonde preteen. Naruto glanced back at his sensei. He was catching up. Of course, Haruka-sensei would catch up. He's a chunin, and Naruto was still an academy student. Did he think he could outrun his sensei? Of course not, but Naruto firmly believed he could outmaneuver him. Naruto glanced around to try and find a way to escape Haruka-sensei, but found none. So, for now, he just kept running. "Naruto? I said come back here." Haruka continued to yell. The blonde knew he needed to do something. Naruto glanced back once more and shook his head. He continued to run until he ran into something, or rather someone. Naruto bounced back and landed on his butt. The blonde put his hand back to his head to steady himself and then snuck a glance at who, instead, he ran into. At the sight of the person's face, Naruto looked away as Haruka finally caught up to Naruto. "Is there a problem here?" the voice called. "No, Hokage-sama," Haruka bowed. One of the academy students refused to take the graduating exam and bolted from the classroom. "I was just about to return to the academy with him. Nothing to worry about." "I see," Minato nodded, then pointed to Naruto, who still sat on the ground, "and this would be that student." "Yes, sir." Haruka glanced down at Naruto and nodded, "Come on Naruto. Let's get back to the academy." "It's alright, Haruka," Minato smiled, "I'll speak with him." Haruka looked back up at the Hokage. "But, sir," Haruka started, but after seeing the look on Minato's face, he nodded in agreement. After one last look at Naruto, who was staring at the ground, Haruka turned and jogged back to the academy, where he had students waiting on him. Minato sighed, crouched in front of his son. "Naruto?" Naruto looked up slowly and caught his father's gaze. Naruto had not said a word this entire time. Minato was beginning to get worried. Naruto rarely spoke when he was out in the village, but he was always chatty at home. He held out his hand to help the little blonde up. Naruto took it and soon they were walking side by side. Minato noted that Naruto seemed nervous. They walked silently for some time. "Look, Naruto, I know that I've been busy recently and we haven't spent much time together." Minato broke the silence after a while, "but this is the 3rd year in a row that you have refused to take the graduation exam. I need to know, is there something going on?" When Minato didn't get a response, he looked down at Naruto. His son walked slowly with his hands in his pockets, staring at the ground and the rocks he was kicking. Something was bothering him and Minato was determined to find out. The Hokage sighed and stopped walking, causing Naruto to do the same. "You're not going to talk unless we are at home, are you?" Naruto, taken by surprise, looked up at his father. He blinked in confusion. Was he really that quiet outside of his home? Yeah, he didn't like the village, but he didn't think the difference in personalities was that noticeable, especially since it had been years since he and his father had spent time together outside their home. Seeing Naruto's surprise, Minato took a deep breath and shook his head. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Minato asked. Naruto looked away, refusing to answer. He turned and walked away. After a few minutes, Minato caught up to his son, and Naruto felt his father place a hand on his shoulder. He stopped walking, knowing what his father was about to do. Let's go home, Minato said quietly, and they flashed to their home. After landing in their living room, Naruto still refused to look at his father. Naruto, will you talk to me now? Minato asked. Yes, Oda-sama, Naruto replied, still looking at the floor. Minato sighed, and Naruto realized his father was getting frustrated with him. What have I said about being so formal with me? Minato's voice had a slight bit of irritation in it, even though he was usually very good at masking his emotions. I'm sorry, Tusan, Naruto looked up at his father. Minato smiled at his son, so tell me, why have you refused to take the exam again? For the third time, might I add. I just don't feel ready to graduate yet, Naruto answered with a shrug. Why? Minato pushed. I don't know, Naruto replied quietly, I don't like the class I am in, and they don't like me. What do you mean they don't like you? Minato repeated. Naruto shook his head, he didn't want to answer. The memories of the cold stares and whispers he always heard around the academy and in the village flooded his mind. Naruto, Minato pushed for an answer. Naruto shook his head again. Answer me, Naruto, Minato stated, bringing out his Hokage voice. They just don't, we don't get along, Naruto finally replied, his voice getting louder, I just don't fit in, okay? Minato sighed again. It was the same answer Naruto gave every year, he wanted to contact the academy and find out what was going on, but he knew that Naruto would say something to stop him. He would tell his father that he would take care of it, make new friends, or be the Hokage's son, of course, he could take care of it. Naruto, this time, I want to speak to your sensei, Minato tried again. Please don't, father, Naruto begged. Alright, Minato sighed. He wanted to let Naruto handle things as he could, but this was the last time he wouldn't step in, but next year, you promise me that you will take the exam, alright? Minato smiled, you are old enough and skilled enough to become a shinobi. Naruto nodded as Minato pulled him in a hug. Naruto pulled back and stared into his father's eyes, Tusan. Minato replied, cocking his head. You are worried about me? Naruto asked. Minato gave the boy a sheepish smile and nodded, you're my son, of course, I will always worry about you, but you are just so quiet all the time, especially when we are around the village. Oh, Naruto nodded. Can you tell me why? Minato asked. Naruto just shook his head. Minato chuckled slightly, why not? Naruto just shook his head again. Minato sighed in defeat, maybe one day, Naruto would tell him. A few months later, Naruto had started back at the academy again. It was October, and Naruto knew what would come on the 10th day of October. It was a day he secretly dreaded. He never understood why that day was so much worse than the rest, besides, it was his birthday. Maybe they hated that he was born. Maybe they blamed him for the whole thing that happened that day. Maybe they believed that if Naruto wasn't born, his dad would have fought better and people wouldn't have died. Although Naruto hated that day, his father didn't understand why until this year. The year Naruto turned 12 years old. That day, Minato would go to the yearly festival to celebrate the defeat of the Kyuubi, leaving Naruto at home per his request. It was a mystery to Minato why Naruto never wanted to attend the festival. When Naruto was younger, he just thought the festival was too late in the evening and the boy was tired, but as he got older, Naruto would always give an excuse. His stomach hurt from too much birthday cake that they had earlier, or he would complain of a headache, or he needed to do his was always an excuse. As far as he knew, Naruto had no bad memories of that day as Minato did. Minato could never figure out why. Did Naruto know more about that day than he realized? Of course, Minato reluctantly had to attend as the Hokage and the savoir of that day. So, like every year, Minato would dress in his formal robes, a top wrapped around his body, and a light blue shirt that went past his hips. It had a black band in the center. The pants were the same color as the top and went to his ankles. He wore a pair of black ninja sandals. Over the top was a long, sleeveless white cloak piped with dark blue. The back of the cloak had the words 4th Hokage. Minato stepped out of the long hallway and saw his son sitting on the couch with a scroll from Kushina in his lap. Minato smiled gently at the scene as Naruto was engrossed in the scroll. Minato walked over and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Naruto looked at his father and gave him a weak smile, which Minato returned. Naruto, I am going to the festival. They are expecting me soon. Are you sure you don't want to come this year? Minato asked. Naruto shook his head. Unknown to Minato, the young boy would be safer at home than in the village. Minato sighed and nodded. Is there anything else you want for your birthday this year? Minato asked, kneeling beside the couch. Naruto stared at his father for a minute, then looked at the scroll. Naruto knew exactly what he wanted from his father this year. I want to know everything, Naruto murmured, still looking down at the scroll. What do you mean? Minato asked. Naruto didn't reply. Naruto knew that his father needed to know what the villagers do. Minato needed to know that the village didn't know who Naruto was and that they believed him to be a demon. Why? Why do they treat me this way? Naruto thought to himself. Naruto clenched his fists, which startled Minato. I want to know what happened to Mom, Naruto answered. Minato nodded, I can make that happen. Is there anything else? I want to know why everyone in the village hates me, Naruto whispered. Minato's face suddenly turned serious and he grabbed Naruto's wrist. What are you talking about, Naruto? Naruto looked at his wrist, then back up at his father. The boy's expression told his father that Naruto didn't realize he had said that out loud. Naruto looked away quickly. Never mind, Naruto shook his head. Minato suddenly moved in front of Naruto, still kneeling, and grabbed Naruto's shoulders, so the boy was forced to face him. He searched Naruto's eyes for emotion, but only found a blank stare. Damn, he was getting good at masking his emotions. Minato's face went from serious to worried, then mad. Naruto, you need to explain, Minato demanded, his voice changing to his Hokage voice. I said never mind, Oda-sama, Naruto replied, unshaken by Minato's harsh voice. Minato took a deep breath and looked at the kitchen clock. He needed to go, or the Anbu would start to look for him. Minato hesitated before letting Naruto go and standing up. We will talk about this when I get home. Do you understand? Minato stated. Yes, sir, Naruto nodded without looking at his father. I'll be back soon, Minato softened. Okay, Naruto nodded again, still not looking at his father. Minato stepped outside his house and placed the necessary seals to protect his son. Then he called for an Anbu member, which happened to be an old student of his. Kakashi, keep an eye on Naruto, Minato ordered, make sure no one comes near him, understood? Yes, sir, the silver-haired Anbu member replied, then disappeared in a puff of smoke. Minato sighed, at least Naruto would be safe until he returned. Minato turned and headed to the festival. He and his son would have a long talk when he returned. When Minato returned that night, he found Naruto asleep in his bed. He seemed to be safe and unharmed. Minato pulled the yellow comforter up and covered the rest of his son, careful not to wake him. Their conversation will have to wait till the morning, but he needs to talk with a certain Anbu member. Minato walked out of Naruto's bedroom and quietly shut his door. Making his way down the hall, he searched for any chakra signatures. Once he reached the living room, he called for Kakashi. The silver-haired appeared in a puff of smoke in a kneeling position. Kakashi, I would like a report of any incidents this evening, Minato stated. You're not going to like what you hear, sensei, Kakashi replied, standing up and removing his dog mask. Kakashi, Minato said in a warning voice. No one came near the residences, but several shinobi had passed by and they were looking for Kakashi trailed off. What were they looking for? Minato asked, becoming concerned. Naruto, Kakashi replied. Naruto? Why were they looking for Naruto? Well, Kakashi stuttered. Kakashi, Minato warned. I heard whispers about beating the shit out of him and making him pay for what he did or something along those lines, Kakashi replied, but they were all intoxicated, sir. Beating him? Minato almost yelled, but remembering his son was sleeping, he returned to a normal voice. Yes, sir, Kakashi nodded. Minato placed his hand on his head and sighed, all shinobi. Well, no, Kakashi replied simply. No. Civilians, too, Kakashi nodded. Damn, Minato shook his head, I can't do much about the civilians, but please get me a list of those shinobi in the morning. The ones that you remember. Yes, sir, Kakashi nodded before being dismissed. After standing there silently, Minato knew he couldn't do anything tonight, so he checked on his son before heading to bed. Minato sat at the dining room table with a simple bowl of rice in front of him. His hands were laced together in front of his face. His expression told that he was deeply thinking about the information he had received the night before. The shinobi and the villagers were hunting down his son last night. The Hokage's son. How could I not have known about this? I am the Hokage, for God's sake. How could I not see the way the villagers had treated Naruto? Minato slammed his fist on the table, knocking over the rice bowl. He was more than upset with himself. He was sucked out of his thoughts when he realized his son was still sleeping. The man sighed and cleaned up the rice. Is this why Naruto's always so quiet in the village? Minato shook his head. Everything that he had ever wondered about started making sense. It was why Naruto was always so quiet outside their home. The reason Naruto never liked celebrating his birthday. The reason Naruto rarely went out in the village. The reason Naruto didn't have many friends and why he lost his friends rather quickly. Minato always thought he caught on to things like that pretty quickly, but how could he have missed this? Minato thought about it a moment and then the answer came. Naruto was never in the village with Minato. He rarely saw Naruto outside of their own home. No one was ever able to make the connection. When Naruto was younger, Minato did it on purpose so that his enemies wouldn't know about him having a son, but mainly for those outside of the village. He didn't do this purposely for his own comrades. As Naruto got older, Minato didn't purposely hide him anymore, he stopped around the time Naruto went into the academy. So, did Naruto continue it on purpose? Or was it simply a coincidence? When he heard feet pad down the hallway, Minato was shaken out of his thoughts again. Soon, a young blonde appeared in the doorframe. The elder smiled at the young boy and motioned for him to sit down. "Are you hungry?" Minato asked as Naruto took a seat. The young blonde shook his head and looked down at his lap. Minato sighed, "Naruto, about last night." "Don't worry about it," Naruto interrupted. Minato stared at his son, waiting for Naruto to look at him. "Did you know?" "I know that shinobi and the villagers look for me the night of the festival," Naruto replied without looking up. "How did you know?" Minato asked. "I heard about it one day when I was a kid," Naruto explained. "I was in the market and I overheard two shinobi planning it for the night of the festival and what they would do to me when they found me." "Do you remember who the two shinobi were?" Minato asked. "If they were planning it, then it wasn't from being drunk." Naruto shook his head. "Naruto, look at me," Minato asked. His son hesitated, but when Naruto finally looked up, Minato finally saw the pain in his son's eyes. "Why, Naruto?" Minato pushed, "Why do you want to continue to bear this weight? This pain?" "It's nothing I can't handle," Naruto stated. "I am the Hokage's son, your son, after all." "Naruto, you shouldn't be afraid of the villagers." Minato just about yelled. "It's not the villagers," Naruto whispered, "they're harmless." "It's not the villagers." Minato repeated, "What do you mean? What do they do?" "They just call me names, like demon, murderer, monster. They tell me I murdered people and things like that, but they never actually do anything. They are too scared to," Naruto explained. Okay, Minato's anger was starting to rise again, but he didn't want to scare his son into not talking, so he pushed it back down and regained his composure. "Has anyone ever caused you physical harm?" Naruto hesitated a few moments but then nodded slightly. If it's not the villagers, then Minato was becoming more rage-filled as he started to understand who exactly had caused harm to his son. Naruto shook his head and looked back into his lap. The young blonde played with his fingers, hoping his father wouldn't ask the question, but. "I need you to confirm, Naruto," Minato stated. "The shinobi," Naruto said, barely audible. Minato's eyes widened in anger. Part of him knew what the answer was, but another part of him had hoped he was wrong. How could the shinobi attack his son? How could his men attack his own son? Minato attempted to regain his composure once more. He was never the one to lose his temper. That was until it came to his son. "Is there anyone particular?" Minato asked. "The younger ones," Naruto answered. "The younger ones? Like who?" Minato pushed. Naruto said, looking around, trying to avoid his father's eyes. Minato warned, "Who?" "Mizuki sensei, for one," Naruto whispered. "Mizuki? Your teacher at the academy?" Minato asked, surprised. Naruto nodded, turning his head down into his lap. His long hair shaded his eyes. "Yes, he beats me sometimes after school," Naruto stuttered. Minato realized that Naruto was starting to lose control of his emotions. "He beats you? After school?" Minato asked as his voice became shaken. "His own sensei beats him. How did I not notice?" Naruto nodded, unsure of his own voice. Minato suddenly stood up, knocking over his chair. Surprised at the sudden noise and movement, Naruto shot his head up. Minato could now see the tears streaking down his son's face. Minato walked over to him and pulled him into his arms. How could he let his son get this hurt by the village he was in charge of? Minato didn't know, but he knew he would be doing something about it. The young boy continued to cry into his father's chest. Naruto always kept all the emotion from the beatings and name-calling bottled up. He never wanted his father to know for reasons he wasn't sure of. He assumed it was because he didn't want his father to feel like a terrible Hokage. But again, this was just an assumption. Maybe it was because he was embarrassed that he couldn't protect himself. Whatever the reason, Naruto had one thing that he swore never to tell his father, and even now, he didn't want him to know. Why are the villagers treating Naruto this way? Minato closed his eyes and furrowed his eyebrows when he came up with the answer. The Kyuubi. The villagers somehow knew Naruto was the Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi. Minato realized this was the very reason why Kushina kept it a secret. She would have gotten the same treatment from the village. Or maybe not, the Kyuubi never attacked the village before that night, so the villagers had no reason to hate her as much as they did Naruto. Even so, she still would have gotten similar treatment for being a Jinchuriki. The more and more Minato thought about the whole situation, the more questions he would come up with. Was it all the villagers? How did they know? When did the treatment start? Have a lot of the shinobi physically harmed Naruto, like Mizuki had? Why didn't Naruto tell him? Hundreds of questions like these ran through Minato's mind. Would they treat him the same if he was around? Of course not, but Minato needed to know. He would have to send Naruto into the village himself. He knew how much pain this would cause his son, but he needed to confirm this. He knew how much he was asking of his son. Of course, if someone tries to harm him, the Hokage would have to step in. Minato sighed as he knew what to do. Naruto. He gently pushed his son away from his chest. Naruto's red swollen eyes looked up at his father. Yes, Tusan. I need you to do something for me, Minato reluctantly said. What? Naruto asked quietly. Minato closed his eyes and slowly opened them again. He prepared himself to ask his son to put himself in harm's way. Naruto did as he was told and walked through the village without any protection. He knew what was coming and he just prepared himself for it. When his father asked him to show him how the villagers treated him, Naruto thought his father didn't believe that his villagers or shinobi would do something like that to his son. That is until Minato explained that he had to have evidence to punish someone. It was just politics. Naruto understood and did what he was told. As Naruto walked, he glanced around and found the villagers were giving him those icy stares like they always did. Naruto wasn't too worried about being hurt, he was more worried about his father, finding out the one thing Naruto wanted to keep hidden. A few villagers shouted at him, calling him a demon and murderer. Naruto was praying his father was hearing all of this and noticed the glares and stares he received. Naruto sighed to himself and continued walking. He was replaying the scene where his father asked him to do this. Naruto remembered his father promising to explain everything once they returned home. He promised to explain why the villagers treated him badly, why Mizuki had beaten him, and why they called him a demon. Naruto silently hoped he wasn't a demon like the villagers often told him he was. Naruto looked at the shop he walked by and noticed a familiar Anbu mask hanging on display. It was similar to the one his favorite silver-haired Anbu member wore. It reminded him of the man who was always assigned to watch him when his father was away. Naruto smiled and walked up to the counter, but he wasn't expecting any customer service. This was a good way to show his father how the villagers would interact with him. "Excuse me, sir," Naruto said as he approached the counter. The large man turned around and glared at the blonde. "Hey, what do you want, demon brat?" The man yelled, causing a few people to turn around and stare at the scene. Naruto acted like nothing was wrong and continued, "I was wondering how much that mask was." Naruto pointed to the Anbu mask. The man reached up and grabbed the mask. "You want this?" Naruto nodded, but suddenly, the man pushed him out of the shop. Naruto landed on his hind end with a thud. Naruto put both hands behind him to steady himself. Then, he felt something hard hit his head. He lifted his hand to the place where he was hit. He looked over and noticed the mask was sitting next to him. The man had thrown the mask at him. As the man stepped out from behind the counter, Naruto thought he would be hit again. Naruto closed his eyes and put one arm before his face, bracing for impact, but nothing came. Naruto opened his eyes to see a familiar cloak in front of him. "That's not how you treat a child," a voice boomed. "Dusan," Naruto whispered. Naruto knew that voice all too well, his father was pissed. "Hokage-sama," the man stuttered as he backed up slightly. Minato turned around, crouched before Naruto, and offered his hand. Naruto grabbed the mask and then took his father's hand. They both stood up and turned to face the large man. Naruto tried to hand the mask back, but Minato stopped him. The elder pulled out some money, enough to cover the cost. Then he turned to his son and pulled him away from the scene. A few steps later, the two blondes flashed back to their home. Naruto hung his head and stared at the mask. He suddenly felt a pair of arms around him. "I am so sorry, Naruto," Minato whispered, "I had no idea the villagers treated you this way." Naruto pushed his father off him, "There is nothing you can do." Surprised, Minato blinked at his son, "What do you mean?" "Unless you are with me always, the villagers will continue to treat me this way. That is until they come to acknowledge me," Naruto explained. Minato sighed, "But I can do something about the shinobi who are bothering you." "What?" Naruto asked. "Well, beating the Hokage's son can be considered treason," Minato explained. "No," Naruto said. Even someone as young as Naruto knew what would happen if you were found to be treasonous. "What?" Minato was again surprised by Naruto's actions. "Please don't kill them," Naruto begged. Minato sighed, "Why not?" Because Naruto started to reply, but he didn't want his father to find out about his secret, so he came up with a lie, "Because you still need shinobi to protect the village." Minato thought momentarily, he knew it wasn't a good enough reason, but he believed it was partly Naruto's choice. "Okay, but they will still need to be punished. I won't back down on that." Naruto nodded, relieved that his father agreed, then pulled the mask to his chest and held it close. Thank you for the mask, Tusan. Minato chuckled lightly, you're welcome Naruto. Tomorrow, you will take the graduation exam to become a genin. I am sure you are all prepared enough to take the exam, Iruka spoke to his class and then glanced at Naruto, are you going to take the exam this year, Naruto? The blonde looked up at his sensei with a bored expression. He glanced around and noticed that his classmates were now staring at him, waiting for an answer. Naruto was loosely paying attention in the back with a few other students. The later-known Rookie 9 was seated in various positions. Shikamaru and Choji were, of course, sitting together on one side of Naruto. Ino and Sakura had fought over who got to sit by Sasuke, which neither won. Kiba was playing with his dog, not paying attention. Before he could speak, someone interrupted him. I don't see why he should, I mean, he's just going to fail, Sakura said with a cocky attitude. Naruto raised his eyebrows slightly at the comment from the pink-haired girl. For once, you're right, billboard brow, Ino agreed, crossing her arms. Shut up, Ino pig. Sakura countered. Naruto looked over at the blonde-haired Yamanaka and rolled his eyes. He didn't need to respond now, the girls were doing it for him. Come on, guys, I'm sure he'll just bolt from the classroom again, Kiba laughed as Akamaru barked in agreement. He might say something now. Actually, Naruto said as he leaned back in the chair and crossed his arms, I plan on taking the exam this year and passing, of course. I promised my father that I would. Your father? Iruka asked. He had assumed that Naruto was an orphan this whole time, but apparently, he has parents, or a father at least. Naruto nodded. Dead last, Sasuke murmured, I doubt you'll pass. We will see, Naruto shrugged. Alright then, Iruka tried to regain his students' attention, the exam will be in 3 parts. The first is a written exam, the second an oral exam, and the third is a performance test. Other side of the academy. The Chunin-level shinobi stood at the front desk of the academy, filing paperwork. He heard the door open and close, and then blankly asked without looking up, something I can help you with? Yes, I'm sure you can, the voice boomed. The man recognized the voice and shot his head up, Hokage-sama. Minato looked at the man, you're Mizuki, aren't you? Why yes, sir, Mizuki nodded. Aside from the reason I am here, I need to speak with you later in my office, Minato stated, I will summon you. Yes, sir, Mizuki nodded again, what can I help you with? I need to speak with my son, Minato said. Your son sir? Mizuki asked, slightly confused. Yes, Uzumaki Naruto, Minato said. Mitsuki's eyes widened and Minato made note of this reaction. They honestly did not know that Naruto was his son. Naruto? Mizuki asked in surprise. Yes, Minato replied, can you retrieve him for me? Of course. Mizuki nodded and jogged off to retrieve the little blonde. Back in the classroom. Iruka continued to talk about the exam to his students. Sitting in the back, Naruto was trying to pay attention, but since he heard this lecture 3 times before, the blonde was having a hard time. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door and Iruka yelled to come in. Naruto noticed that it was Mizuki, the one who would beat him almost every day after school. Naruto unconsciously narrowed his eyes and tensed up. Shikamaru and Sasuke were the only ones to notice. Iruka and Mizuki briefly discussed something before turning their attention to the blonde. Their eyes showed the same expression. Shock. Naruto closed his eyes and shook his head, shit. Again, Shikamaru and Sasuke caught on to his reaction and knew something was up. Sasuke was closer and was about but was cut off by Iruka calling Naruto's name. Yeah? Naruto replied hesitantly. At this point, all the students had picked up on their instructor's expression and had turned their attention to the blonde at the back. Naruto swallowed hard at suddenly being the center of attention, and not in a good way. Your father is here to see you, Iruka said. What? Naruto's eyes suddenly widened. Why was his father here? Your father has come to retrieve you, Mitsuki repeated, narrowing his eyes at Naruto. Alright, Naruto nodded and stood. He made his way down the stairs to the door of the classroom. Iruka continued to stare at the blondie until they had walked out of the classroom and Mizuki closed the door behind them. Once they were alone in the hallway, Naruto had stiffed like he was preparing for one of the beatings from Mizuki. He flinched when he felt a hand on his shoulder. He looked up and found Mizuki staring ahead as they walked. The blue-haired man looked pissed. Why didn't you tell us who you were, Uzumaki-sama? Mizuki snarled as he tightened his grip on the blonde's shoulder. Don't call me that, Mizuki-sensei, Naruto snapped back, trying to free his shoulder. What? Uzumaki-sama. Mizuki smirked and looked down at him. Yes, that. Naruto snapped again. We'll have to see about that, Mizuki said as they reached the principal office of the academy. The blue-haired shinobi removed his hand from Naruto's shoulder before Minato noticed them. Minato stood staring at the wall of photos of the academy teachers behind the main desk. The Hokage heard footsteps coming down the hall and turned to see the two approaching. Mizuki had an expression on his face that Minato did not appreciate, but he would deal with him later. Right now, he had something more important to do. Naruto. Minato smiled at his son as Naruto walked up to him. "Do-san," Noro replied. Minato placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder, the same one Mizuki had placed his hand on. Naruto unconsciously flinched at the touch. Minato noticed but didn't acknowledge it or remove his hand. He knew precisely why Naruto had flinched and he didn't want Mizuki to see that he was aware. The two blondes walked out of the academy together and made their way to one of the few places where Naruto felt most safe, the large field just beyond the Hokage monument. "Do-san?" Naruto asked as they walked through the village. "Yes, Naruto," Minato replied. "Why did you pull me out of school?" Naruto asked. "We could have come afterward." "Because I have a meeting this evening with the heads of the clan and the day after your graduation, I have to leave for a few days. I promised to explain everything and I have put it off long enough. I had some free time this afternoon, so I thought we could talk. Plus, I bet you have heard the pre-exam lecture enough already, huh?" Minato replied. "Yeah, I guess," Naruto shrugged. They walked up the tall stairs up the mountain and through the town just behind the heads of the Hokage. "Naruto, another reason I pulled you out of school was because I am dealing with some of the shinobi that have harmed you later this afternoon when they are all back from their missions," Minato said. Naruto looked at his father. "What do you plan to do, father?" "I'm not going to kill them, per your request, even though I want to. I'm simply going to demote them. Those who are Chunin will now be Genin and Jonins will be Chunins again. None of them will be getting any mission higher rank than C, but mostly D rank," Minato explained. "This way, their entire lives will be uprooted." "Oh," Naruto nodded. "But there is a particular one that I want to talk to you about," Minato said through his teeth. "Mizuki sensei," Naruto whispered. "Yes," Minato explained, "I gather that he is the one who has caused you the most pain. What do you want me to do?" "Whatever you want, father," Naruto said simply. "Okay, why the sudden change?" Minato asked. "Father, I didn't want you to kill the shinobi for treason because I didn't want you to lose some good shinobi. The village still needs to be protected, but since Mizuki is only an academy teacher, I don't care what happens to him," Naruto explained. "The village won't suffer due to the loss of one shinobi and academy teacher at that." "I see," Minato nodded. It was strange that Naruto cared about the village itself, even when he was treated so horribly. "Why do you care so much for the village, Naruto?" Naruto looked up at him, a little confused about the question, and replied in a tone that indicated that the answer should have been obvious. "Because you do, father." Minato smiled at him. "Since it is not a high act of treason, I don't think that the council will appreciate me killing him, so I think I will send him to Mizukijim." "Mizukijim?" Naruto asked. "Yes, it's more commonly known as blood prison," Minato nodded. "It isn't a fun place to go. He will serve a life sentence." Once they finally reached the field, Naruto trotted past his father and sat cross-legged in the middle. Naruto turned his face to the sky and took a deep breath with a genuine smile. Minato continued to walk at the same pace and take in the scene unfolding before him. He loved seeing Naruto this happy, and it was a rare sight, so he took his time. Right before he reached his son, he had made sound barriers, preventing anyone from hearing their conversation. Naruto had made the connections to why his father would bring him here. Normally, they only came here on rare occasions, like Minato's birthday, when he wanted to escape the village. This is the place where everyone knows not to bother them. Minato smiled at his son again and sat cross-legged in front of him. Naruto returned the smile with a large grin of his own, one that Minato wouldn't see very often. The little blonde truly loved being here. Minato started. "You're going to tell me what happened to mom, right?" Naruto interrupted. Minato chuckled lightly. "Yes, I am, but I will also tell you why I believe the villagers treat you like they do." "Oh," Naruto replied. "But I will start at the beginning." Minato took a deep breath. "The beginning?" Naruto repeated. "Yes," Minato nodded. "Naruto, have you ever heard of the Kyuubi?" "The Kyuubi? Yeah, they talked about it in the academy. The Kyuubi attacked the village around the time I was born and you killed him," Naruto thought out loud. "Well, that's what we told them to teach," Minato corrected. "What do you mean, Tusan?" "When the Kyuubi attacked the village, I knew there was no way you could kill a tailed beast," Minato explained. "Wait, a tailed beast? Are there more than one?" Naruto asked. "Yes," Minato nodded, "there are 9. The Ichibi, Nibi, Sanbi, Yanbi, Gobi, Rikubi, Nanabi, Hachibi, and the Kyuubi." 1 through 9, Naruto repeated. "Exactly," Minato nodded. "But how did you defeat the Kyuubi if you can't kill a tailed beast?" Naruto asked. "You must seal the tailed beast into an object, most common is a person," Minato explained. "Oh, and you sealed the Kyuubi into someone?" Naruto asked. Yes, I did, Minato nodded. A person with a tailed beast sealed inside them is called a Jinchuriki. A Jinchuriki, Naruto repeated. Yes, Minato nodded. Who did you seal the Kyuubi in, Tusan? Naruto asked. Minato breathed deeply. Naruto, I sealed the Kyuubi into you. After a moment with no response, Minato repeated, Naruto, you are the Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi. I'm the Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi. Naruto repeated in disbelief. I'm the Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi, Naruto repeated again, but this time with a louder voice. He was almost yelling. Naruto suddenly stood up and placed his hand on his stomach. Naruto's eyes started to water. Minato also stood up and tried to place a hand on his son's shoulder, but Naruto moved away, not wanting his father to touch him. Naruto stared up at him with a mixture of emotions in his eyes. I am a demon, Naruto murmured. No, you're not, Naruto, Minato tried, but his son wasn't listening. They were right, Naruto continued, I'm a monster. No, they aren't. Minato grabbed both of Naruto's shoulders. Naruto looked up at his father with watering eyes and a mixture of emotions until one took over. Anger. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the elder blonde and did something Minato wasn't expecting. Naruto clenched his fists, then sent one into his father's stomach, which made Minato release his son and double over in pain. Surprising Minato more than anything. How could a 12-year-old's punch be so strong? How could you seal the Kyuubi into your own son? Naruto yelled at his father. Minato started to respond but was cut off. How could you? Naruto said again, softer this time. Naruto started backing up slowly as Minato steadied himself. Minato noticed what Naruto was about to do. Naruto, wait, Minato held out his hand, but it was too late, Naruto had bolted. Minato started to go after him but stopped. Naruto needed to let this sink in. He had hoped Naruto would let him explain why the Kyuubi was sealed inside him, but he didn't get the chance. Suddenly there was a puff of smoke beside Minato, and a silver-haired Anbu member was next to him. Do you want me to retrieve him, sir? The masked man asked. No, just follow him and make sure he is safe, but let him come home on his own terms, Minato ordered. Yes, sir, the masked man nodded and disappeared in a puff of smoke. Minato sighed. That didn't go well, Kushina. I wish you were here. You would have explained it better and maybe he wouldn't have bolted like that. Minato decided to go home, he would deal with the shinobi later. He already gave the missions department a list of shinobi who were not allowed to go on missions until he dealt with them, so there was no rush. He would need to be emotionally compassed to do so. He thought about flashing home but decided to walk. He needed time to think and Kakashi would ensure that Naruto was safe. He knew that Kakashi would let him come home when he was ready. Although Minato knew Naruto was safe from harm, he still worried about him. He truly didn't think Naruto would react that way. He was normally one to think first, like himself, but at that moment, Naruto had acted like his mother. He reacted first instead of thinking, just like Kushina. Maybe there is a bit of her in him, Minato thought. Minato walked slowly back to his home to wait for his son. Minato walked up the stairs to the door, silently hoping Naruto had already beaten him home, but that wasn't the case. He walked into the house, took off his shoes, and went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. I'll make Naruto's favorite, that may help. Minato smiled as he pulled Kushina's cookbook out and opened to the most used page. Minato started making Naruto's favorite dish, Kushina's homemade ramen. Even if Minato didn't make it as well as Kushina did. Naruto still hadn't come home several hours later and Minato started to worry. Did something happen to him? Is Kakashi protecting him? What if something happened? Minato's head was filled with the worst case scenarios. It was getting dark out. He considered looking for his son until he remembered that Kakashi always carried one of his special kunai. Minato could flash to Kakashi and Naruto would be nearby. Minato could check on his son without him knowing he was there. Minato closed his eyes and searched for the kunai. Once he found it, he flashed to it. He landed on a tree branch on one of the training fields next to Kakashi. The silver-haired Anbu didn't seem fazed by the sudden appearance of his sensei. Minato looked over at his student. Kakashi had slid his mask to the side of his head. The blonde followed Kakashi's gaze and found Naruto sitting cross-legged at the stream's edge. Minato looked around and noticed they were at training ground 7. It was strange for Naruto to come to this place where Minato had several memories. He hasn't moved for several hours, maybe you should go talk to him, sensei, Kakashi suggested as he glanced at Minato. I guess that I should. I was hoping Naruto would come to me, but it's getting late, Minato agreed. The blonde hopped down from the tree and landed silently. He strolled over to where his son was sitting. Upon Minato's arrival, Naruto looked up. His eyes were red and swollen. His cheeks were stained with tears and his nose was still runny. Minato tried to take a deep breath, but his breath hitched. I talked to him, Naruto said quietly. To whom, Naruto? Minato asked. The Kyuubi, Naruto said as he gazed at the river. Flashback. Naruto took off away from his father. He knew the elder would try to follow him, but he hoped his father would leave him alone. Minato had done enough already. He ran through the village, down the stairs, and headed to the training grounds. It was getting late, so he prayed they would be empty. He picked a random one and headed there. He slowed to a walk and noticed his father hadn't followed him. He found a small clearing in a random training ground. He looked around and noticed the large stone in the center of the clearing. He walked over and found it was a memorial stone. He looked and found a familiar name. Uzumaki Kushina. Mom, Naruto muttered. The tears that had slowly stopped started forming again. Mom, why did you let Oda-sama make me the Jinchuriki? Why? The village hates me. I am a demon. Naruto slid down to his knees. His eyes and nose started running again. After an eternity, his eyes finally dried as they ran out of tears. The young blonde stood up and unconsciously approached the small stream. He sat down and crossed his legs. He sat there staring at the clam water until he got an idea. The blonde closed his eyes and tried to enter his mindscape. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself in a long hallway. It was dark except for the slight yellow glow from the dim light bulbs in the ceiling. He looked down and noticed he was standing in ankle-deep water. Looking back up, he found himself drawn to one adjoining hallway. The water splashed at his feet as he walked to the hallway. He stopped at the opening and took a deep breath. He continued making his way until he came to a very large cage. So, my vessel has decided to grace me with his presence, a husky voice thundered out of the cage, followed by two red eyes. You're the Kyuubi? Naruto's small voice replied. I am, the Kyuubi snarled. I'm sorry you have to be sealed inside me. I don't want you here any more than you want to be here, Naruto said. What's this? A Jinchuriki apologizing to a tailed beast. The Kyuubi laughed. But since we are stuck with each other, we might as well get to know each other, Naruto shrugged. I am the Kyuubi. The nine-tailed demon fox. Why would I want to get to know a weak little kid like you? The large fox laughed. Because you're stuck with me, Naruto replied simply. You're just a little kid. What makes you think you can control me? The Kyuubi continued laughing. I have for 12 years so far, Naruto replied, remaining surprisingly calm. The Kyuubi didn't reply. Besides, we are alike, you know. Everyone hates me, just like they seem to hate you, Naruto continued, maybe one day we can even become friends. Ha! Friends. Don't make me laugh, kid. The Kyuubi laughed. Naruto walked closer to the cage and found the Kyuubi lying down with his head resting on his front paws. Do you have a name? Besides Kyuubi? Or is Kyuubi your name? HN, was the only reply. I have to go now, Naruto said, 2 Cent will start to worry about me. Maybe one day you will tell me your name. Then flashback. 2 Cent? Yeah? I'm sorry I took off like that, Naruto said. It's alright, Naruto, Minato smiled, you needed time to process. The moon was bright and it shined off the stream. The two blondes sat there in silence for some time. Minato took a deep breath as he decided to break the silence. Naruto, I wouldn't have made you the Jinchuriki if I didn't have a good reason, Minato stated. I know, 2 Cent, and I should have realized that earlier, but I took off. I'm sorry. I didn't let you explain, Naruto looked down into his lap. Minato sighed, I honestly wasn't sure how you would react, so I was prepared for the worst. Although it didn't even cross my mind that you would punch me. Naruto reached up and starched the back of his head, sorry about that. Minato laughed, I'm the Hokage, I think I can take a punch from my 12-year-old. So, why did you seal the Kyuubi in me? Naruto asked. Because I believe that you can control him. I trust you with him because you are my son, Minato explained. Oh. Naruto, I also couldn't ask any of the parents in the village to do something like make their child a Jinchuriki if I couldn't do it myself. It wouldn't be fair, Minato continued. I see, Naruto nodded. Your mother didn't want to make you the Jinchuriki because she knew the burden it would be on you, Minato frowned at the memory of Kushina yelling at him that night. What do you mean, 2 Cent? Your mother was the Jinchuriki before you, Minato said. She was? Naruto asked. Yes, so she knew full well what we were asking of you, but I knew you could handle it, Minato continued. Oh. Also, I knew if a strong woman like your mother could control the Kyuubi, then her son could too, Minato smiled and placed his hand on Naruto's head to ruffle his hair. Wait, if she was the Jinchuriki, how did the Kyuubi attack the village? How did mom die? Naruto asked from underneath his father's hand. It's a long story, Naruto. It's getting late, and you have a graduation exam to take, Minato smiled, I'm sorry Naruto. It's going to have to wait. Oh, but aren't you going out of town? Naruto asked. Hey, we will figure it out, Minato shrugged, then gave him a smile. Minato stood up and offered his hand to his son, who took it. Once they were both standing, Minato flashed them back to their house. Minato reheated the ramen he made for the two of them. As they ate dinner, Naruto would randomly make a face. "What's wrong, Naruto?" Minato asked once he made another face. "I keep trying to talk to the Kyuubi, but it's like he is refusing my call or something, I can't quite explain it," Naruto explained. "Kushina told me about this. Your connection in your mind is like a conversation. You both have to want to talk. Does that make sense?" Minato tried to explain. "So he's just not wanting to talk?" Naruto asked. "I guess so, but Naruto," Minato started. "Yay? Don't talk to the Kyuubi too much, he's not a good influence," Minato waved the chopsticks in his face. Naruto gave a small laugh and then agreed. "Oh, and one more thing," Minato's expression suddenly got serious. "What?" "The Kyuubi stays between you and me. It is not to be shared. If it got out that you were the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, it could put you in a lot of danger," Minato said with a very serious tone. "Just like I would be if I were named Namikaze?" Naruto asked with a little bit of sarcasm and anger in his voice. Naruto hated that he wasn't named after his father, even if it did make it easier to hide who he was. Minato sighed, picking up on the anger. "Yes, Naruto, just like that." "But the shinobi and the villagers already know?" Naruto asked. "Yes, some do," Minato nodded, "but it's more outside the village that I am worried about. Villages have tried to kidnap the Jinchurikis from other villages before. We don't want that happening again. After the night when the Kyuubi attacked and you became the Jinchuriki, I made a law that forbids anyone from speaking about the Kyuubi. It will stay in effect until you are old enough to defend yourself." "Oh," Naruto said, playing with his food. Minato sighed, "We will discuss this more later. Let's get to bed, you have a graduation exam in the morning." Naruto nodded and helped his father clean up dinner. They both washed up and headed to bed. The blonde Hokage sat at his desk with his elbows at the edge and his fingers laced in front of his face. Although he was a shinobi and couldn't let his emotions take over, he had difficulty hiding his angry expression. Minato was terrifying when he was angry. His usually bright blue eyes were now dark and filled with rage. Today was the day he was waiting for. The day the shinobi who hurt his son would be punished. The day his son could walk around the village without fear of being beaten by the shinobi, or at least that was the goal. Several shinobi of various ages stood in front of the fuming Hokage. Many of them had never seen Minato this angry before, while the elders had not seen him like this since he found Jiraiya-sama peeking into the women's bath while Kushina was there. Even though several were terrified of the livid Hokage, their expressions didn't show it. Finally, the last shinobi that Minato had summoned arrived and it was time to get down to business. Minato dropped his hands on his desk with a loud thud. "Do you know the punishment for a shinobi accused of treason?" Minato asked with a booming voice. "Yes, sir," the room chorused. Of course, being shinobi themselves, they knew the answer. "Did you know harming the family of a Kage is considered treasonous?" Minato continued. "Yes, sir," was the answer that rang out. "Then each of you should know that by harming my family, a child nonetheless, all of you have committed a treasonous act," Minato's voice echoed throughout the room. Every one of the shinobi in the room was taken aback by what Minato said. The expressions were alike, but none were brave enough to speak up. Minato was very surprised by the reaction of the shinobi standing in front of him. Most were shocked, while others were confused, not the expressions Minato expected. The blonde narrowed his eyes at the man, hoping at least one would be brave enough to say something. Finally, one of the men in front had enough courage to speak. "Sir, I believe I speak for everyone here when I say that we aren't sure what act of treason you are referencing," the man defended. "You don't know what act of treason I am referencing?" Minato snapped and stood up, slamming his hands on his desk. "No, sir," the man shook his head. "I am referencing to the fact that all of the shinobi standing before me have abused my son somehow," Minato yelled. "You have a son, sir?" the man asked as his voice wavered. Minato was taken aback by the question. Of course, he had a son. What kind of question was that? "Yes, I have a son. I understand if the villagers weren't aware of him," Minato gritted his teeth, he was seething, "but my own men. Hell, he sat in the corner of my office every day until he went to the academy." "Sir, we didn't know you had a son, honestly." A couple of the shinobi tried to reason. "Who is your son, sir?" one asked. "Uzumaki Naruto is my son," Minato replied. The man he was speaking to suddenly could not talk as his eyes widened in obvious realization. The rest of the shinobi in the room had the same or similar reactions. Minato narrowed his eyes at the men. "That kid is your son?" one of the men asked. "Yes," Minato snapped. "I swear to God that and I assume the other men here, didn't know that he was your son," another said. "How could you not know that he is my son? For God's sake, we even look alike." Minato continued. "The boy never said anything, Hokage-sama," a voice said. Minato turned and looked at where the voice came from. Mizuki, Naruto's sensei, would beat and abuse him after school. Minato had hoped to deal with him separately, but it didn't look like that would be the case. "He never said anything." Minato repeated. No sir, Mizuki shook his head. When asked about his parents, he would stay quiet or make very vague replies. Minato furrowed his eyebrows at Mizuki's answer. Although he didn't believe a word they were saying, how could they not make that connection? He had no proof that they did know Naruto was his son. Minato then remembered Mizuki's reaction when he went to pick up his son from school. Maybe they were telling the truth, and maybe not. For now, Minato would give them their punishment anyway. Regardless, Naruto is a child, and he suffered forms of abuse from all of you, so as punishment for causing physical and mental harm to my son, you all will be demoted, Minato said. What? A few chimed. Those of you who are Chunin will now be Genin. Jonins will now be Chunins. You will not be allowed to advance in ranking for at least 5 years, Minato continued, your missions will not be higher ranked than C. Are you kidding? A few gaped in awe at their punishment, that's not fair. You should be thanking my son that you are not dead. Minato yelled. The room went silent. When I found out that all of you have beaten and abused my son, I wanted to have you all executed that moment, but my son stepped in and wouldn't allow it, Minato explained. Now I ask, what would you have done if you found out that your child was beaten and abused by your comrades? By men you grew up with? That you went to school with? That you fought alongside? That you would have given your life for? What would you have done? A few men shook their heads while others remained silent. Exactly, Minato said, I am the Hokage, and my men, the ones I am in charge of, have done this to my son for years. He received mistreatment for nothing he has control over, for things he has never done. What do you expect me to do? Your punishment isn't harsh enough for beating a child, let alone my son. But Naruto disagreed. You should be thanking him for sparing your lives. I wanted to have you all executed or thrown in prison. Naruto is the one that saved your asses. When only silence came Minato's way, he continued. The little boy you used to beat, hit, kick, abuse, that little, helpless boy, ending up being the one to save your life. You should be ashamed of yourselves for harming a defenseless child, whether he was my son or not. Minato's voice started quieting down, he's not the demon you think he is, in fact, he's the only thing keeping the Kyuubi at bay. Instead of hating him, you should be in awe of him for bearing the weight of the burden we placed on him. He is stronger now than any of you will ever be. Minato sat back in his chair, exhausted from the yelling he did. He leaned up on the desk, laced his fingers together, and placed his forehead on the fist he made. He took a deep breath in and glanced back up at the men. They now had the expressions Minato was expecting. They looked degraded and ashamed and humiliated. Minato took another deep breath, satisfied at making those men feel horrible for what they did. Their punishment should teach them well, even if he did think it wasn't enough. You're dismissed, Minato stated, and Mizuki, I will speak with you separately. All the men exited the office, leaving one blue-haired shinobi in the center. Minato breathed out an angry breath. He hated the man standing before him, but being the Hokage, he couldn't let personal feelings interfere. Minato gritted his teeth. You were one of Naruto's senseis at the academy, correct? Minato asked. Yes, Hokage-sama, Mizuki nodded. Mizuki, Naruto told me about what you did to him. He identified you as one of the worst when it came to the abuse he received, Minato explained, therefore, you will receive the worst punishment. Mizuki only nodded in response. Thanks to the council, your life will be spared, but you will stripped of your shinobi status and sent to Mizukijin, Minato stated. Mizuki's mouth dropped open at the mention of the prison. Anbu? Minato called. Suddenly, a silver-haired Anbu member with a dog mask and a brunette with a cat mask appeared, taking Mizuki on either side. Your chakra will be sealed away, Minato explained, I will let Inoichi and Ibiki do what they will with you before you are sent to Mizukijin. Mizuki continued to stare in disbelief. Take him away, Minato stated. With a puff of smoke, the three men disappeared. Minato sighed as he looked at the clock. I need to get to the academy. They should be expecting me soon. Alright, for the final part of the graduation exam, you must demonstrate one of the 3 basic jutsu. Kawarimi no jutsu, Bunshin no jutsu, or Henj no jutsu, Haruka explained to the class. We will be going backward alphabetically, first up is Yamanaka Ino, Haruka finished. That means I will be next, Naruto thought to himself. Ino stood up and followed Haruka to the next room, but not before Sakura called her Ino pig and told her not to fail. A few moments later, Haruka returned to the room, next, Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto stood up with everyone's eyes on him. Naruto was used to being stared at, so he didn't react but walked down the stairs to follow Haruka to the next room. Don't fail, dead last, Sasu commentated as Naruto walked by. I don't plan on it, team, Naruto replied casually. Don't call Sasu-kun that. The pink-haired girl called out, which Naruto ignored. Haruka held the door open for the blonde as he stepped through. Are you ready, Uzumaki-sama? Haruka asked as Naruto walked by. Naruto stopped, and the world stood still momentarily before he shot Iruka. "Look, don't call me that." "Oh, I'm sorry Naruto. Let's begin," Iruka said, closing the door. "Uzumaki-sama. What's that all about?" Sakura asked. "No one in particular." "Who knows?" Kiba snorted. "Naruto's probably hiding something," Sasuke smirked. "It probably has something to do with the name Uzumaki," Shino commented. "Why?" "Because there is no one else in the village with that name." What about his parents?" Choji asked. "Isn't Naruto an orphan?" Sakura replied. "Naruto-kun doesn't talk about his family much," Hinata whispered. "That's probably because he doesn't have any," Kiba said. I bet Naruto is going to surprise us all," Shikamaru said. "What do you mean, Shikamaru?" Choji asked, munching on a bag of potato chips. "Just watch," Shikamaru smirked. Naruto followed his sensei down the hall into a large classroom. It was empty except for a table at the front. Iruka instructed him to the center of the room. Naruto didn't glance over at the table because he knew who would be sitting there. Mizuki. Naruto made his way slowly to the center and kept his gaze down. "Please perform the Henge no Jutsu," a familiar voice called. When Naruto heard the voice, his head shot up. "To-san." "Naruto," Minato nodded. "Why are you giving the final test of the exam?" Naruto asked. Minato leaned forward and placed his hands on the table. "Mizuki was occupied, and I couldn't find a replacement teacher in time, so I filled in. Now, if you could perform the Henge no Jutsu, please." Naruto smiled, nodded, and placed his hands together in a ram sign. Henge no Jutsu. Naruto had transformed into the fourth Hokage with a puff of smoke. After a few seconds, there was another puff of smoke and Naruto returned to normal. "Very original, Naruto," Minato chuckled lightly. I didn't have to change much," Naruto scratched his head. "The henge was complete, Hokage-sama," Iruka nodded. "Indeed it was," Minato agreed. "Does that mean I graduated, To-san?" Naruto asked, giving his father a large grin. "Well, we have to add up the rest of your scores to determine that, Naruto," Minato explained. "Please move to the waiting area. It's next classroom down." Naruto nodded and headed out the door. He didn't mind revealing his identity to Iruka since he already knew when his father picked him up from the academy. Still, he didn't appreciate Iruka calling him Uzumaki-sama in front of the classroom. Naruto made his way to the next classroom slowly. He slid the door open and noticed Ino was sitting at one of the desks. "How'd it go?" she asked politely. "Well, I think," Naruto shrugged. "You?" "Good. Which did you have to perform?" she asked again. "Henge, you?" "Clone," Ino replied. "Glad I didn't get that one, I suck at clones," Naruto laughed. Naruto took a seat a little ways from her. The next to enter the classroom was Sasuke, who surprisingly sat next to Naruto. The blonde shot him a look, which was replied with a glare. Naruto understood that the Uchiha wanted to avoid sitting next to Ino. Next was Shikamaru, who murmured something about troublesome, followed by Kiba, who ranted about it being easy. A few others followed suit. Slowly, everyone arrived in the classroom and took various seats. Once all the students had arrived in the classroom, Iruka followed. "Alright, take a seat and be quiet," Iruka ordered. Everyone did as they were told and took their seats. Ino woke Shikamaru up while others adjusted them. Once everyone was quietly seated, Iruka spoke up. "Alright, we tallied all your scores from the 3 exams," Iruka started. There was a short silence, and Naruto took a chance to say something. "What? Is the Hokages not going to tell us who passed and who didn't?" Naruto asked. Iruka chuckled lightly. "No, sorry Naruto. The Hokage said he had some business to take care of." Naruto nodded as he understood, and Iruka continued. "Alright, I will announce who all passed and who didn't. Those who passed will be ordered from highest score to lowest. If you don't hear your name, you didn't pass," Iruka explained. The student sat there waiting for Iruka to continue. "Afterwards, those who didn't pass need to leave, the others remain here for further instruction, and you're hit I, understood?" "Hi," was replied in unison. "Alright then, let's begin," Iruka nodded. "The highest score and the first person to graduate is." You could almost feel the tension in the room rise as the class waited for the first person's name to be called. Most figured Sasuke or Shikamaru would score the highest, but no one expected the result. "Uzumaki Naruto," Iruka finished, a little surprised himself. A few gasps were heard throughout the room and Naruto could feel everyone staring at him. Naruto looked up at his sensei and smiled. Iruka only nodded in response. "Dead last, finished first." Sasuke smirked. "I guess so," Naruto murmured. Uchiha Sasuke, Aburame Shino, Iruka continued to call names for 10 minutes. Once he was finished, several students got up and left, leaving the rookie 9 and a few others in the classroom. "Congratulations on graduating," Iruka smiled. "Now the real fun begins." "Real fun?" Kiba repeated. Tomorrow, all of you will report here for your first assignment, Iruka continued, smiling. Please come forward to retrieve your hit I-8s. Everyone did as they were told, grabbed a hit I-8s, and exited the academy. A group of parents were standing in the courtyard waiting for their children. Naruto was the last to leave the building. He looked around and didn't see the yellow spiky hair he knew all so well. He sighed and looked down at his hit eye. Congratulations and special dinners were heard throughout the group. Naruto glanced around once more and then heard some familiar whispers. They let him become a ninja. You know what could happen if that kid starts learning jutsus. That's him. That's the SHH. It's taboo. Naruto shook it off, but it still hurt no matter how much he was used to it. He stuffed his hit I-8 in his pocket and made his way out of the group to head home. He would see his father tonight, but he must be busy right now. Naruto lowered his head. Naruto, a soft voice came from the other side of the yard. Surprised at the voice, Naruto looked up and saw his father standing there with one hand on his hip. Minato gave him a huge smile and beckoned him forward. Naruto returned to the smile and trotted up to his father. Naruto stopped short of his father and pulled the hit I-8 out of his pocket. Minato crouched down and hugged Naruto. Congratulations, son. Naruto returned the hug, thanks, Too-san. By now, Naruto knew the whole village would soon discover he was the Hokage's son. He would have some explaining to do to his father. And hopefully, he wouldn't be too hurt or too mad. Naruto pulled back and Minato stood up. Minato looked over to the group of parents and found it strange that they were staring at him like he was a ghost. Minato saw Shikaku Tsume and several other clan leaders and nodded. He did the same to the other shinobi. Didn't know the Hokage had a son, Shikaku commented, watching Minato with a little blonde-haired boy. Especially his son being the demon child, Tsume agreed. I knew Naruto was Hokage-sama's son, Shikamaru shrugged, but what do you mean, demon child? Never mind that. How did you know? Shikaku raised an eyebrow. Well, it's kind of obvious, Shikamaru said, I mean, they look and act alike. Shikaku nodded in agreement. Too-san. Can we go home? Naruto asked. How about we go to the field and finish our discussion instead? Minato smiled. Naruto smiled and nodded in agreement. He looked down at his hit I-8, placed it on his head, and tied it. Now I look like you, Naruto laughed. Minato ruffled Naruto's hair, you've always looked like me. Minato placed his arm around Naruto as they descended the familiar path to their favorite spot. Minato sat across from his son as he chatted about the easy exam he had taken only hours earlier. Minato would laugh or ask a question occasionally. He was happy that Naruto was starting to open up more. A few months ago, Naruto would not have been this chatty. Minato sighed. He's becoming more and more like Kushina every day. Who knew the villagers kept this bubbly personality bottled up in his son? Naruto finished his monologue, ending with everyone being surprised that Naruto had the highest scores. There was a moment of silence, and Minato took it. I'm glad school went well for you, Naruto, Minato smiled, but tomorrow, your real test starts. What do you mean, Too-san? Minato laughed at the memories, you'll just have to wait and see. Naruto crossed his arms and made a hump sound, which only made Minato laugh more. The laughing soon became contagious as Naruto started laughing too. Once the laughing subsided, Minato knew it was time to get serious. Naruto needed to know what happened to his mother. He promised it, and it was time to tell him. Naruto, I promised I would tell you about your mother, Minato started, I think you are old enough now to understand the whole story. Naruto nodded and pushed Minato to continue. As you already know, Kushina, your mother, was the Jinchuriki before you. Before I tell you what happened the night you were born, it would be best for you to know more about your mother's history, Minato said. Mom's history? What do you mean? Wasn't she from Konoha? Naruto asked. Yes, she lived here, but it's not where she was born, Minato shook his head. Oh. Your mother was chosen as the second Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. She was brought to Konoha for that purpose, Minato continued, she was originally from the Whirlpool country and she lived in the village hidden in the eddies. Wait, why was she living in Konoha if she was from another country? Naruto asked. The Whirlpool and the Fire Country, as well as the Hidden Eddies and Hidden Leaf, have solid ties to one another, Minato explained, the Uzumakas and the Senjus, the leaders of the villages, were distant blood relatives. The people of the Eddies had astonishingly long lives, giving them the nickname of being the village of longevity. The Uzumaki clan specialized in sealing. The Sealai used to seal away the Kyuubi inside of you was based on her clan's technique. Kushina taught me several sealing techniques, allowing me to become a seal master. Wow, Mom must have been an amazing sealer, Naruto commented. Minato chuckled, yes, she was. The symbol on the shinobi uniform was the symbol of the Eddies. It now symbolizes friendship and goodwill. However, during the war, her village and country were destroyed. People began to fear their sealing techniques. The few survivors spread across the globe. But why was she chosen? Naruto asked in a rather loud voice. Kushina was born with a powerful chakra that could suppress the Kyuubi. The Jinchuriki before her was also an Uzumaki. Her predecessor was the first Hokage's wife, Uzumaki Mito. Really? Naruto wondered. Yes. Naruto, you were taught about the battle between Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara in school, correct? Minato checked. Yes, Naruto nodded. During their battle, Hashirama gained control of the Kyuubi, and to aid her husband, Mito sealed the Kyuubi into herself, becoming its first Jinchuriki. From then on, Konoha had a procession of the Kyuubi. When Mito was nearing the end of her life, Kushina was brought here to become the next vessel, Minato continued, she never told me much about how she became the Jinchuriki. That's something you are going to ask her. What do you mean? Naruto suddenly became confused. Minato shook his head, I'll have to explain that later. Wait, if mom was the Jinchuriki, how did the Kyuubi attack the village? Naruto asked. 12 years ago, when the Kyuubi attacked the village, a man had control of it. He somehow knew the one thing that could naturally weaken the seal, Minato said. What? Childbirth, Minato stated. You mean when I was born? Naruto asked. Minato nodded, yes. A full-term pregnancy for a female Jinchuriki is about 10 months. As the baby grows, the chakra that supports the seal is redirected to nurture the baby, so the seal weakens in direct proportion. We took precautions for the Kyuubi in case anything were to happen. We moved Kushina out to a vacant cave nearby with only me, Bawako, the third's wife, an Anbu member, Taji, and your mother knew the location. The man somehow knew that Kushina's seal would be the weakest the moment you were born. He could take down the Anbu members we placed outside and enter the cave without anyone's notice. I was born in a cave. Naruto asked, raising an eyebrow. You're missing the point, Naruto. Minato shook his head and continued, I won't go into the details about your birth. You're a little young for that, but right as I was about to redo the seal, the man took down Bawako and Taji right after you were born and took you from us. He threatened to kill you. I got you back, but he put you in harm's way to get me away from your mother. I flashed home to put you somewhere safe to save your mother. But you were too late. Naruto assumed. Not exactly, Minato's voice started to shake as he relived those painful memories. The man took her to a place right outside the village and ripped the Kyuubi from her. I managed to get there right after the Kyuubi had been extracted and move her to a safe place, but the man and the Kyuubi were headed to the village. Dusan. Naruto called, noticing the tremble in Minato's voice. When the elder blonde lifted his head, Naruto noticed tears running down his face. You don't have to tell me the rest if it hurts too much. No, it's alright, Naruto. Minato shook his head, wiped the tears from his face with his sleeve, and took a deep breath to continue. I took your mother to where I had left you, then went to face the man and the Kyuubi. Once I arrived at the village, the Kyuubi was already on a destructive path. I had to stop him from destroying the village anymore. But that man had other plans. He moved me away from the village and fought me one-on-one. I can't go into detail here because they are classified, but I will say I was able to injure him and get back to the village, but not before I made him lose control of the Kyuubi and summon Gambunta to help me handle the Kyuubi. What do you mean summon Gambunta? Naruto asked. I have signed the toad summoning contract. Gambunta is one of the toads. I will explain that more when you are ready, Minato answered Naruto's question, then continued the story. Gambunta was able to hold down the fox long enough for me to build up chakra to teleport the Kyuubi outside the village. I also was able to get both you and your mother. I brought you too because I had a plan. I may have been able to injure the man, but I knew he'd be back. Kushina used the last chakra to put a barrier around the Kyuubi to hold him down. Kushina was prepared to use the last of her chakra to reseal him inside her and have him die alongside her. But you didn't let that happen? Naruto asked. No, my original plan was to seal half in me with a dead demon seal and half inside you because you were so young. I didn't think your body could handle all of the Kyuubi's chakra, Minato explained. But mom wouldn't let you do that either, Naruto assumed. No, we came up with a different plan. She would seal half of the chakra inside her and the other half inside you, Minato continued. I thought that having the chakra inside would help her live, but… She died, Naruto finished for him. She did. She knew she was going to die and had me seal her remaining chakra inside you so that you may one day be able to speak with her, Minato said as he placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder. She didn't want to place such a heavy burden on you, but in the end, we both knew that you would be able to handle the Kyuubi. Because I'm the son of two heroes, Naruto smiled. Yes, you are. Your mother died with the second half of the Kyuubi inside her, but since she didn't have the soul of the Kyuubi, it will remain with her, Minato explained. She loved you so much, Naruto. She had so much she wanted to teach you. You loved her so much, didn't you too, San? Naruto asked. Yes, my son, I did. I loved her more than anything. She made me her husband, she made the Hokage, and she made me your father. I wouldn't be the man I am today without her. I wouldn't have you without her." Minato ruffled Naruto's hair again and smiled as tears ran down his face. "I think I would have loved her a lot," Naruto whispered. "I think so, too," Minato agreed. Naruto and Minato sat for a long time in silence. Naruto was taking in what his father had just told him, while Minato was trying to regain his composure after reliving those painful memories for the first time since that night. It was getting late as the sun was starting to set. The elder blonde took a deep breath. They both had a long day to prepare for tomorrow. Naruto had his first day as a genin, and Minato had to go to Suna to meet with the Kazekage. Minato could tell Naruto was in deep thought, and although he didn't want to disturb him, they had to go home. Minato was about to speak when Naruto interrupted him. "Do-san?" Naruto called. "Yes. You said you sealed the rest of Mom's chakra into me so that I could speak with her one day," Naruto thought aloud. "I did," Minato nodded. "When do you think that will be?" Naruto asked. "To be honest, I am not exactly sure." Minato placed his hand on his chin as he thought, "but one day soon." "Oh, okay," Naruto nodded. "How about we go home?" Minato suggested. "We both have a long day tomorrow." Naruto nodded in agreement and then went to stand up. Minato wrapped his arm around his son as they headed towards home. Naruto didn't seem as afraid to go into the village as he did a few months earlier, for which Minato was grateful. Naruto's true personality was starting to shine through, but it would be a while before anyone besides Minato would get to see the real Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto walked beside his father with a newfound confidence. The young blonde was unsure where this self-assurance came from. Maybe it was the fact that he was a genin now. Maybe it was because he felt safe walking beside his father through the village. Maybe it was because he felt he didn't have to hide who he was. The gossip would spread like wildfire through the village. Naruto was so consumed in his thoughts that he didn't even acknowledge the glares he was getting. He paid no attention to the whispers. Although Naruto didn't hear or see them, Minato sure did. But it made the elder blonde feel a bit helpless that he couldn't do anything to change the way the villagers felt towards his son. Only Naruto could do that. Minato glanced at the sun, which was starting to set in the sky. He guessed the time and realized he had a meeting with the clan heads that evening. Their path would lead the elder in the opposite direction he needed to be going. Minato worried momentarily, then pushed it aside, knowing his student was never too far from his son. "Naruto?" Minato called as he stopped. Naruto took a few steps before he noticed his father had stopped walking and called his name. The blonde stopped and turned to face the elder. "Yeah?" Naruto replied, walking back up to his father so that he was only a foot away. "I had forgotten I have a meeting with the clan heads this evening. Will you be alright walking home by yourself?" Minato placed his hand on Naruto's head to ruffle his hair. "I'll be fine, Tusan." Naruto smiled beneath Minato's hand. "I'm a shinobi now." Minato chuckled lightly. "I guess you are. Besides, you know what to do if something." "I know, Tusan." Naruto interrupted as he continued smiling. "Alright," Minato smiled and removed his hand. "I will see you at home in a few hours." Naruto nodded, turned around, and started walking in the direction he was heading. Minato watched momentarily before reassuring himself and walking back to the Hokage Tower. Naruto walked through the village a little less confident than he was earlier. His father would be home soon, and he knew his favorite Anbu would be watching until he did. The sun was completely set and the streets were empty, for which Naruto was thankful. It was silent except for the occasional voices coming from the houses. Unexpectedly, Naruto found himself flying backward and pinned to the wall of an ally he had just passed. His throat was crushed by a strong arm and his arms felt numb as they were restrained behind him. Naruto forced his eyes open to face his attacker. His eyes widened even more when he recognized his assailant. He tried to speak, but his throat was numb from the pressure. "You listen here, demon," the man demanded, "you are going to retrieve something for me." Naruto gathered enough strength in both legs, shoving them into the man's stomach. The man slid backward as Naruto fell to his knees. The blonde coughed as his throat regained its feelings and his lungs gasped for air. "Why you?" the man started. "I'm not doing anything for you, Mizuki." Naruto tried to yell, but his voice failed him and his words were barely above a whisper. "Oh, I think you might." Mizuki's voice suddenly got very confident. Naruto looked up at his former sensei to find a very devious smirk on his face. The blue-haired man put his hand in his pack that sat on the small of his back, pulling things out. Naruto watched as he kept trying to get his breathing under control. When Mizuki showed the young boy what he had pulled out, a small scroll, Naruto's eyes widened to an almost unnatural size and his mouth dropped open, ready to speak, but no words came out. "This is important to you, no?" Mizuki snarled. "How did you get that?" Naruto said as his voice finally came back to him. "How is not important," Mizuki stated. "Now, you are going to retrieve something for me." "What do you want?" Naruto asked, almost pleading. "The forbidden scroll from your father's library," Mizuki stated. No, Naruto said bluntly. Then I guess you're not getting this back, Mizuki shrugged as he placed the scroll back. Please. Naruto pleaded, then hesitated momentarily. Alright, I will get it for you. Good, Mizuki nodded. Naruto raced home as thoughts flew through his mind. What was he going to do? Where was the Anbu that always watched him? Where was his father? He couldn't give Mizuki the forbidden scroll. His father would never forgive him. But that traitor has his scroll, something he couldn't live without. How was he going to get out of this one? Naruto shook his head as the small house came into view. He raced up the stairs, fished out his key, and rushed into the house. He didn't bother to take his sandals off as he ran to the door he was told never to open. Naruto turned the knob and headed into the room. It wasn't anything spectacular, just a basic library. Bookcases and shelves lined the walls. The shelves were filled with books, scrolls, and paperwork. In the center was a desk with a small lamp. Naruto glanced around momentarily before noticing the small button in the corner of the desk. Naruto pushed it, and one bookcase slid open, revealing a large white and green scroll with scroll of sealing written on it and a tasseled rope tied around it. Naruto took a deep breath and reached for the scroll but stopped midway. Father would have a silent alarm on the scroll, but he will find me soon if he is notified. Naruto took this as a good thing as he pulled the scroll out of the cabinet. To Naruto's surprise, nothing happened. He also grabbed a brown scroll strap. He took a glance at the scroll. There might be something in there that can help me, but I'll have to be quick. Naruto threw the scroll on the desk and untied the rope. The scroll rolled open, revealing the first of the forbidden jutsus. Page Bunshin no Jutsu. Similar to the clone technique, this technique creates clones of the user. However, these clones are actual copies, not illusions. The user's chakra is evenly distributed among every clone, giving each clone an equal fraction of the user's overall power. The clones can perform techniques independently and even bleed, but will usually disperse after 1 or 2 solid blows. Hand seal. Middle and index finger cross. It's the first one, Naruto said to himself, it's probably the least dangerous. Naruto made the hand sign and followed the instructions. With a puff of smoke, an exact copy of him appeared. He poked it to ensure it was a shadow clone, not a regular one. Then Naruto got an idea. He made a second shadow clone, then turned the first into an exact copy of the forbidden scroll. He instructed the remaining clone to take the actual forbidden scroll and head to the field where his father would know where to find him. He then took the copy of the scroll, strapped it to his back, and headed out. With Minato. Minato sat at the head of the large table with several shinobi around him. Only 2 clans were missing, the Uchiha and the Yamanaka. Minato and the heads continued to discuss the latest topic when the door suddenly slammed open. Minato looked up from the paper he was reading. Inoichi, you're late. Minato stated. I'm sorry, Hokage-sama. But we have a problem, Inoichi said, breathing heavily. Problem? Minato repeated. Yes sir. Mizuki, he's gone, Inoichi explained. Minato suddenly stood up, slamming his hands on the desk. Yes sir. It seems it was an inside job, Inoichi said, there's also something else, sir. What? Minato snarled. The silent alarm for the forbidden scroll went off, Inoichi informed the Hokage. The scroll is in my library, Naruto. Find him. Now. Minato yelled. The shinobi nodded, stood up, and followed directions. Minato flashed home to find his little boy not there. He took a short breath and called for Kakashi. Yes, sir, the silver-haired Anbu replied after a puff of smoke. Mizuki's gone. Find Naruto and protect him, Minato explained. Yes sir. Kakashi replied. Wait, one has the forbidden scroll, the key to Naruto's seal is there. I'm afraid Mizuki might want to unleash the Kyuubi, but even if not, and Naruto finds it, Minato trailed off. Understood, sensei, Kakashi nodded. Go, Minato ordered. Kakashi pulled a scroll from his pack, bit his thumb, and summoned his ninkin. Find Naruto. You know his scent, he ordered the pups. The dogs nodded and then headed out. After a moment, one of the dogs called Kakashi, started to take off and noticed Minato was preparing to follow him. He stopped and turned around. Stay here, sensei. In case he comes back, Kakashi ordered, but it sounded more like a question. Minato took a deep breath. He wanted to go find his son, but his student was right. He needed to stay here in case Naruto returned or the shinobi had information on Mizuki. He reluctantly nodded and sent Kakashi off. He trusted the silver-haired shinobi because Kakashi loved Naruto almost as much as he did. Naruto, where are you? Minato thought to himself as he watched his student take off through the night. Naruto walked into the forest with the scroll strapped to his back like he was instructed to do. He went to the small clearing where Mizuki was already waiting. You actually got the scroll, Mizuki smirked, bring it here, demon. Naruto nodded and walked over to the blue-haired man. He undid the scroll from his back and placed it on the ground before him. Naruto then backed away from the scroll. Please give me the scroll, Mizuki, Naruto begged. Fine, Mizuki pulled the small scroll from the pocket and tossed it to the blonde. Naruto caught the scroll and held it close to his chest. He let go of the breath he had held since Mizuki had attacked him in the alley. He sighed and put the scroll away. He lowered his head so that his long blonde hair covered his eyes. Then, a mischievous smirk crossed his face. He crossed his first two fingers into an all-so-familiar sign and ended the jutsu. A split second later, as Mizuki reached to pick up the large scroll, it disappeared in a puff of smoke. What the hell? Mizuki yelled as he looked back at the blonde, who still had his eyes covered. Hage Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, the blonde whispered as he slowly lifted his head to reveal red slit eyes. Suddenly, 1,000 or more shadow clones surrounded Mizuki and the original Naruto. Kakashi flew through the trees as he followed one of his ninkin. Pakin led him into a forest on the far side of the village. How much farther, Pakin? Kakashi questioned without wavering his speed. We're almost there, Pakin replied. Several moments later, Kakashi and Pakin landed without a sound in a small clearing in the forest. Kakashi's eyes widened behind his mask as he noticed the blue-haired shinobi lying face down on the ground and a young blonde-haired boy standing above him. Naruto looked over towards the young Anbu member as Kakashi realized the boy was dirty and his clothes were ripped, but he seemed completely unharmed. Naruto's eyes suddenly closed and he started to fall. Kakashi flashed over and caught the boy before he hit the ground. Kakashi looked at Mizuki and noted that he was still alive, but barely. He was about beaten to death. No jutsus were used, just basic taijutsu. He called for backup. The Anbu would know what to do with the traitor. Then it hit him. Where was the forbidden scroll? He looked down at the young boy in his arms and thought momentarily about asking Naruto, but he didn't want to disturb him. Kakashi carefully adjusted Naruto so he was on his back, piggyback style. Kakashi sighed, then dismissed Pakin and headed back to the village. Kakashi was flying through the trees at an alarming rate when he felt Naruto shift on his back. He turned his head and noticed that Naruto's eyes were slowly widening. Hachi? Naruto whispered before falling back asleep from chakra exhaustion. Kakashi smiled from behind his mask, remembering when he first met the young boy and the day he was named Hachi. Flashback. What? The young Anbu asked. I said I want you to meet my son, Minato repeated, then turned around, Jiraiya-sensei. Jiraiya walked around the corner holding a small child about 3 years old in his arms. The little one looked like a miniature version of the fourth. Kakashi blinked at the young blonde in surprise. I didn't know you had a son. Kakashi said, let alone one that is like 3. Minato chuckled as he reached for his son. Yes, Kushina was pregnant, but we kept Naruto and Kushina's pregnancy from most of the village. I'm sorry we didn't tell you, Kakashi. But since you are Anbu, we thought it was best if you didn't know such sensitive information. Kakashi nodded, I understand, sensei. Good, Minato smiled, then turned to Naruto, would you like to meet one of my favorite students, Naruto? The little boy giggled as he leaned forward to be face to face with the masked silver-haired Anbu. Naruto stopped laughing and looked at Kakashi with a serious face. Then, out of nowhere, Naruto poked the mask on Kakashi's face. Hachi? Naruto exclaimed. Hachi? Kakashi repeated. Naruto nodded in response. I'm not Hachi. I'm Kakashi. Kakashi protested. No. Hachi. Naruto pouted. Minato and Jiraiya both laughed at Kakashi's new nickname. It's not funny, sensei. Kakashi said, still protesting, tell him my name is Kakashi. Ah come on, Kakashi. It's a cute nickname for you. Especially since your Anbu mask is a dog. Minato replied. Kakashi started. Come on, let him call you that, Minato laughed. Kakashi glared at his sensei and then finally replied, fine. In Minato's arms, Naruto giggled again, finally got down, and ran to the young adult. Naruto looked up at his future sensei and smiled. Kakashi couldn't help but return the smile with one of his own. Then flashback. Several hours later, Naruto was back safe at home, asleep in his bed from chakra exhaustion. Minato slowly closed the door to his son's room and placed several security seals around the room and the house. Although he thought they were unnecessary now that Mizuki was back in custody, he could never be too careful. Minato turned to face his student and try to understand what happened tonight. The elder blonde sighed and started walking towards the kitchen table, signaling Kakashi to follow. He motioned for the young Anbu to take the seat across from him. Kakashi did as he was told. Once both were seated, Minato took a deep breath and prepared himself, so, let's start from the beginning. What happened tonight? And how did we allow it to happen? We believe Mizuki escaped with the help of someone on the inside, we have yet to figure out who. But we will. He was tracking Naruto for some time, but could not find him until he sensed you. We cannot determine why he couldn't sense Naruto's chakra, but was able to sense yours, Kakashi explained. I placed a chakra suppression seal on Naruto. It keeps sensory types from finding him. For two reasons. The Kyuubi and he is my son, Minato explained. I see, Kakashi nodded. Once you left Naruto, he confronted him. When Inochi got from Naruto's memories, the Mizuki had a scroll that was of value to him and used it to get Naruto to retrieve the forbidden scroll. Kushina wrote that scroll for Naruto. It's the one thing she left for him, Minato explained in a voice so quiet it was almost a whisper. Oh, Kakashi replied, pausing momentarily. Naruto did as he was told, or so it seemed. Or so it seemed. Minato pushed. You aren't going to like what comes next, sensei, Kakashi replied. Just continue, Minato said. Kakashi took a deep breath. Naruto had every intention of giving Mizuki the forbidden scroll until he got an idea. An idea? Minato repeated. Kakashi explained how Naruto learned Kage Bunshin and Taj Kage Bunshin from the forbidden scroll. And how Naruto deceived Mizuki to get his mother's scroll back. Then it goes black, Kakashi finished. What? Minato asked. It goes black. There aren't any memories of what happened after Mizuki learned that Naruto didn't have the actual forbidden scroll, Kakashi explained. How does he not have any memories? Minato questioned. Inochi thinks he does have the memories, but didn't allow him to see them, Kakashi shrugged. I think you are just going to have to ask Naruto yourself. Minato nodded in agreement. Sensei? Did you get the forbidden scroll back? Kakashi asked. Minato nodded again. Yes, Naruto's clone brought it back once it received the order from the original to do so. I see, Kakashi said. Kakashi? Minato caught the silver-haired Anbu's attention one last time. Hi. Kakashi replied. Why weren't you there to protect him? Minato questioned. I received a summon to the headquarters that was supposedly from you, but it turns out it was a fake, Kakashi explained, then hesitated a moment before continuing. It's my fault that Mizuki got to Naruto, sir. I should have known the summon was a fake. Minato was slightly shocked by the attachment in Kakashi's voice. It was rare for the man. The Hokage only nodded. He knew Kakashi would never leave Naruto unprotected unless it were for something of importance. A summon from the Hokage was quite important. You should get some sleep, Kakashi. You have a long day tomorrow as well, Minato smiled. I do, Kakashi agreed. I will see you later, sensei. I mean Hokage-sama. Kakashi stood and bowed to the Hokage before taking his leave. Minato followed and went to his room after checking on Naruto one last time. Kakashi made his way home. He decided to walk instead of taking the fast way off the rooftops like he normally does. It was late and the Anbu had several things on his mind. Like how he would be a Jonin leader for a Genin team tomorrow. Kakashi sighed and recalled when Minato-sensei asked him to be a Jonin leader. Flashback. Oh, Kakashi. You're here. Good, Minato said to the Anbu with the dog mask as the man stood in the center of the office. Minato put down his pen and then leaned back in his chair. Please remove your mask, Kakashi, Minato instructed. Kakashi did as he was told and pulled his mask to the side of his head. I have a favor to ask of you, Kakashi, Minato smiled. Yes, Hokage-sama. Kakashi replied. I want you to become a Jonin leader for a Genin team, Minato explained. Kakashi stood there momentarily, unsure that he had heard his sensei right. Then, when he realized that he was certain that that was what his sensei asked, he wasn't sure what to say. He can't say no to his sensei, let alone the Hokage. How was he supposed to reply? I know, Minato started, you thinking how can I be a Jonin leader? What is he thinking? I can't say no to the Hokage. Well, I have several reasons why I want you to become a Jonin leader. Which is? Kakashi pushed. Minato reached into the bottom drawer of the left side of his desk and pulled out 3 files. He placed them on the desk and motioned for Kakashi to come forward. He pulled the top file out and flipped it open. Naruto is my number one reason. After what has happened with the other Jonins in the village, you are really the only one I completely trust to teach Naruto correctly and protect him with your life, Minato explained. The second reason is Uchiha Sasuke, Minato sighed, then shook his head. After what Itachi did to the Uchiha clan, there isn't anyone left who can teach Sasuke how to use the Sharingan besides you. You are the only one left that has the Sharingan, and I know you aren't an Uchiha, but it will have to do. This is only if I am correct on Sasuke awakening the Sharingan, but with him being Itachi's brother and the clan head son, I expect him to. I understand, sensei. But Kakashi started. No buts, Kakashi. This is an order, Minato stated. Yes, sir, Kakashi nodded with a sigh. Good, Minato smiled and returned the files to the drawer. You start in 2 weeks. I will cut back on the most dangerous missions so I won't lose my son, sensei. Understood, Kakashi nodded. Thank you, Minato smiled, you are dismissed. Yes, sir, Kakashi nodded, then disappeared with a puff of smoke. Then flashback. Kakashi sighed. He was almost forced into being a Jonin leader, but some being Naruto-sensei didn't seem all that bad. He always protected the little brat and now he can finally teach the little one how to protect himself. Kakashi smiled as he found his way to his apartment. Maybe being a Jonin leader wouldn't be so bad. It was still early in the morning when a certain little blonde made his way down the hall, although not so little anymore. He almost automatically made his way to the kitchen and into the small adjoining dining room. Naruto sat down without realizing his father watched every step he took with curious yet worried eyes. Naruto rubbed the sleep from his eyes before finally looking around. He looked into the kitchen and saw his father watching him with a plate and a dish rag. Minato turned around, placed the rag and dish on the counter, and entered the dining room. Naruto smiled up at his father as he ruffled his hair. "Naruto, you're up early," Minato said as he kneeled down to be at the same level as his son. Naruto's only reply was a slight nod. "Are you okay?" Minato asked, very concerned. Naruto nodded again. "You sure?" Minato eyed him curiously. Naruto only shrugged. "Well, that's not very reassuring," Minato gave him a weak laugh, "couldn't sleep." Naruto shook his head. "Oh, I see," Minato nodded, "why couldn't you sleep?" Naruto shrugged again. "Just when I thought Naruto was starting to open up to me, something like this happens, and I must start again." Minato sighed, night terror. Naruto looked down and nodded. "About last night?" Minato asked again. Naruto nodded again. Minato sighed. He pulled Naruto into him and held him tight. "I'm so sorry, Naruto. I wasn't there to protect you, I haven't been able to protect you. If Kushina was here, then." "Stop, Two-san," Naruto whispered, gently pushing his father away. "What?" Minato responded. "It's not your fault, Two-san," Naruto shook his head, "you've been the best dad. If anyone else were my dad, they would hate me for being the Jinchuriki. But you love me for me. And I know mom would, too." "Oh, Naruto," Minato smiled at Naruto and pulled him into another hug. "Maybe I was wrong. Maybe this won't affect Naruto as much as I thought it would. Besides, what doesn't kill me only makes me stronger, right?" Naruto whispered. "Who told you that?" Minato pulled back to look at Naruto. "Hachi?" Naruto smiled. "Oh, he did." Minato laughed. Naruto nodded. "I'll wait to ask Naruto what happened last night. He's got a long day and I don't want to ruin his first day as a shinobi." "Two-san, what's for breakfast?" Naruto asked. "I don't know. What would you like?" Minato smiled. Naruto thought for a moment, "Ramen." Minato laughed. Minato stood up, motioning for the other to follow. The two men headed to the kitchen and started their daily routine. "Okay," Iruka started as everyone had taken their seats in the classroom for the last time, "you will be separated into 3 groups. A Jonin will lead the group." Naruto was listening to Iruka talk about the duties of a genin while being unaware that most of the other genin were watching Naruto, whispering about his lineage and the secrets he kept from them. "Alright, let's start with groups," Iruka smiled. "I wonder who will be with Naruto," Ino whispered to Sakura. "I don't know, but it would be pretty cool to be on the same team as the last Uchiha, the 4th second son," Sakura smiled. "Yeah, it would," Ino replied, leaning down on her elbows. I pity the guy with you," Shikamaru huffed. "And team 7 is Uzumaki Naruto, Hinuro Sakura and Uchiha Sasuke," Haruka said. "Really? I'm on the same team as Naruto and Sasuke." Sakura blinked. "Lucky," Ino rolled her eyes. "Team 8, Inuzuka Kiba, Aburam Shino, and Hyuga Hinata," Haruka continued. "I'm not on the same team as Naruto," Hinata thought to herself. "Team 10 is Nara Shikamaru, Yamanaka Ino, and Akimichi Choji," Haruka finished up, "you will meet your Jonin leaders this afternoon, until then, you are on break." "Boy. Naruto." A voice called from behind. Naruto was walking a familiar path to his father's office. His hands were shoved in his pockets and his head hung just out of habit. When he heard the voice, Naruto stopped and turned around to find Shikamaru, Choji, and several others standing in a group. They seemed to be following him. "Yay?" Naruto replied without fully turning around. "Where are you heading?" Choji asked, munching on a bag of potato chips. Naruto mumbled, "Two-sen's office. I didn't bring lunch." "Your dad? You mean the 4th?" Ino asked. Yeah," Naruto nodded as he turned to face the group. "How come you never told us that the Hokage was your dad?" Sakura asked. Naruto only shrugged in response. "You have to have a reason," Shikamaru pushed. "I do, but that doesn't mean I have to share that reason with you," Naruto argued. "True," Shikamaru nodded, "but I think we are going to push until you do." "Fine, I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want to be treated like some celebrity just because of my lineage. I wanted to be a normal kid," Naruto explained. "But I guess my plan backfired. I wasn't treated normally. I was treated horribly. If those shinobi knew who I was, I wouldn't have been treated so badly. Hindsight is always 20/20. "Makes sense," Shikamaru shrugged. "Do you know who our sensei is going to be?" Sakura asked. No, why would I? Naruto shook his head. But why did you make everyone think you were stupid? Kiba snorted. Because there are several smart people in my class. If a kid like me were determined to be a genius, then they would have put two and two together. My looks plus my grades, someone would have figured out my link to the Hokage, Naruto explained. He is a lot smarter than we thought, Shikamaru thought to himself. Now, if you'll excuse me, I would like to eat and normally, Toussaint will buy me food, Naruto said as he turned around and waved to the group. Naruto started to walk away from the group and silently thanked for the silence until he heard some feet running up to him. Naruto sighed heavily and looked over to see who followed him. The blonde was surprised to see the dark hair and blue clothes. Uchiha Sasuke. Naruto gave the raven a confused look and it was returned with a leave it alone look. Naruto rolled his eyes and made his way to his father's office. The pair walked in silence as they headed towards the Hokage tower. Naruto was tempted to ask the Uchiha why he was tagging along but decided to drop it, seeing how Sasuke didn't have a family anymore and Naruto didn't mind. They walked up the stairs, down the hallways, and past the secretary to the Hokage's office. "Toussaint," Naruto called as he walked through the door. "Oh, Naruto," Minato blinked as he looked away from all the paper on his desk. The office was empty except for basics. Minato was sitting at the large oak desk in the center of the room, facing away from the wall of windows that overlooked the village. There was a pile after pile of paper on the desk. Minato put the pen down and sat up. He then noticed that Naruto wasn't alone. "I thought you were at the academy," Minato asked. "I was, but we have an hour break and I didn't bring lunch again," Naruto explained. "Oh, and you brought Sasuke with you?" Minato motioned towards the raven standing by the door. Naruto shrugged, he tagged along. "You know who I am, Hokage-sama?" Sasuke asked. Minato chuckled lightly, "Of course. I know almost everyone in the village." "Oh," Sasuke replied. "Toussaint, can we go get lunch?" Naruto asked. "Naruto, I am swamped with paperwork. I can't get lunch right now," Minato sighed. "I can give you money and then you and Sasuke can go get some ramen." "I guess that's fine," Naruto shrugged. "Okay," Minato nodded. Naruto strolled over and received the money from his father, then started heading out the door. "Oh. Toussaint," Naruto asked, "who is my sensei?" Minato laughed, "It's a surprise." "Damn," Naruto pouted, then headed to one of his favorite places. The future rivals walked silently until they reached the ramen stand. They each sat down on one of the stools, not next to each other, placed their orders, and waited in silence to receive their lunch. It was strange for both boys to eat with another classmate. They both had been alone in the academy for some time and didn't know how to act exactly. So they remained silent. When their food arrived, they considered it a good excuse to remain quiet. Of course, Naruto finished his first and waited for the raven to finish. "So, why did you tag along?" Naruto asked, almost scaring everyone. If I didn't, fangirls would have mobbed me," Sasuke shrugged. "Oh," Naruto replied. "Your dad seems pretty nice," Sasuke mumbled. "Yeah, he is," Naruto agreed, "we better head back to the academy. We don't want to be late to meet our sensei." "HN," Sasuke huffed. Naruto paid for their food and stuffed the change in his pocket. The pair walked silently back to the academy. When Naruto and Sasuke walked in, the rest of the class was already in the classroom, gossiping, talking, and the like. Iruka followed shortly afterward and told everyone to take their seats. Iruka explained that each Jonin would come in and pick up their team and the genin were instructed to follow their sensei's orders. Each Jonin came and left with their team, leaving Sasuke, Naruto, and Sakura waiting for theirs. "He's late," Naruto mumbled. "HN," was Sasuke's only reply. "I wonder why," Sakura thought aloud. After 2 hours of waiting, the three genin started getting restless. Naruto started pacing. Sakura watched Naruto walk back and forth while Sasuke had fallen asleep. Then suddenly, scaring the three, the door opened and a head popped in. Gravity-defying silver hair, a dark blue mask, and only one eye visible was the first thing the genin saw. "Follow me," the jonin instructed. The genin did as they were told and followed the tall jonin up the stairs to the academy's roof. The silver-haired man instructed the three to sit on the small steps as he leaned against the railing. "Alright, let's introduce ourselves," the jonin said. The three younger sat there momentarily before the older man thought he should start but hesitated to see what those three would do. He had their files, so he knew what he needed to know about each one. However, judging their skills versus their personalities was different. He knew the blonde extremely well, based on their past experiences, and he knew Sasuke from the psychological analysis done on him after the Uchiha massacre, but the pink-haired girl her knew nothing about, besides personality. "Sensei?" The Rosetta raised her hand. "Yes." The jonin replied, jumping him from his thoughts. "Would we get to know something about you first?" Oh yes," the man nodded, "my name is Kakashi." I have no desire to tell you my likes or dislikes, and as for my dream for the future Kakashi looked at each of the genins' faces. He would have to drag it out of the you. Blondie. Introduce yourself. Naruto looked at the man with a curious expression. It was almost half surprise or what you would call the deer in the headlights look mixed with confusion and suspicion, but the boy did as he was told. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I like ramen, especially ramen from Ichiraku's. I dislike school. My dream is to become Hokage. Okay, next, Kakashi nodded. My name is Hinuro Sakura. I like reading and training. I dislike my dream is to become the best kunoichi in the village. The pink-haired girl said. Kakashi nodded. My name is Ichiha Sasuke. I don't have many likes and several dislikes. My dream, or ambition rather, is to kill a certain man and resurrect my clan, Sasuke said with a serious face. Good, now that we have all introduced ourselves, we can move on, Kakashi said, pretty much ignoring the introductions. Tomorrow we will start your duties as shinobi. What are we going to do, Kakashi-sensei? Naruto asked. Kakashi yes, I could get used to that. We are going to complete a survival exercise, Kakashi said bluntly. But we did plenty of those in the academy, Sakura said slightly confusedly. I know, Kakashi shrugged, but this time, I am going to be your opponent. You? A jonin with a presumably high rank versus 3 recently promoted genin. That hardly seems fair, Naruto complained. Kakashi just shrugged in response, then pushed off the rail he was leaning against. Meet me at training field 7 at 6 am tomorrow. Here are the details, he said, handing them each a piece of paper, and don't eat breakfast, or you'll throw up. Each nodded before the silver-haired jonin disappeared in a puff of smoke. The 3 genin sat in silence for what seemed like an eternity. What now? Naruto suddenly said to no one in particular. I don't know, Sakura replied, we could go train. I'm going to head home, Sasuke said as he stood up, I'll see you 2 in the morning. I'm going to head home too, Naruto said as he followed suit, see ya Sakura. Bye, guys, Sakura waved to the 2 boys and headed home. Dusan. Naruto said as he opened the door to his father's office. Minato looked up from his desk and found his son standing halfway through his office door. The older blonde smiled and waved the young genin in. Naruto stepped in, clicked the door behind him, and then approached his father's desk. You wanted to see me after school today? Naruto asked. Yes, I wanted to talk to you about what happened last night, Minato explained, waving Naruto round the back of the desk. But did Ibiki already look through my memories? Naruto asked, puzzled. He did, but there were some missing, Minato continued as he leaned his elbows on his knees, so he was more at Naruto's level, so I wanted to ask you, plus I wanted to be sure that you were okay. I'm fine, Tusan, Naruto replied. Well, good, Minato chuckled, so, do you want to explain what happened last night? I'll try to, Naruto shrugged. Minato nodded, go on. Well, Mizuki attacked me just after you left me last night. He had Mom's scroll. I don't know how he got it. He told me I needed to retrieve the scroll and he would trade me. I didn't want to give him the scroll. I knew you would be mad and it would end up bad, but he had Mom's scroll, Naruto explained, and his voice started to break as he continued, so, I thought of a plan where I learn the Kage Bunshin from the scroll and make a fake. I sent the fake to the field where I knew no one would find it. Then I deceived Mizuki with the fake, then what happened, Naruto? Minato pushed, starting to get slightly worried. I'm not sure, Naruto shook his head, then grabbed one side with his hand, it's kind of hazy. Try, please, Minato said. I think I made 1,000 or so shadow clones, but not with my chakra, Naruto tried to explain, it's like this red chakra, almost like it was from my anger at Mizuki. The Kyuubi. I ordered the clones to attack Mizuki, Naruto continued, then I dispersed them, and everything went back to normal, but during the whole time, it felt like I had the red aura around me. I see, Minato nodded. That's why Ibiki couldn't see it, the Kyuubi prevented it, but why? Why did the Kyuubi lend Naruto chakra? Why did the Kyuubi prevent Ibiki from seeing Naruto's memories? Something's not adding up. Dusan? Naruto asked, shaking Minato from his thoughts, why are my memories so hazy? What's that red chakra? And that red aura? Naruto, Minato started, I think it was the Kyuubi's chakra. The Kyuubi? Naruto repeated, why would I use the Kyuubi's chakra? Well, the seal I created to seal the Kyuubi into you allows you to draw on the Kyuubi's chakra, but if he doesn't want you using it, you can't, Minato explained. So he let me use it? Naruto asked. That's what I assumed happened, Minato replied, but Naruto, using that chakra can come at a price. The price? Minato nodded, a Jinchuriki can tap into the tailed beast's chakra for his or her own power, however, using such chakra can be harmful to the Jinchuriki, with the host's body and mind being influenced or even taken over by his or her demon. Oh, so the Kyuubi can take over my mind and body if I use too much chakra. Naruto asked. Yes, Minato nodded. Did mom ever have problems with the Kyuubi's chakra? Naruto asked after a moment of silence. Not too many that I could recall, but there were a few missions we went on where I could tell that she drew on the Kyuubi's chakra, but her seal, if I remember correctly, didn't let her draw on the chakra as much as yours does, Minato explained, but Naruto, don't think too much about it. You are strong enough to handle the Kyuubi, if you weren't, I wouldn't have sealed him into you. I know, Tusan. Naruto smiled. Good, Minato reached up and ruffled Naruto's hair. Tusan, I have one more question, Naruto looked up at his father from underneath his hand. What is it? Minato blinked at the other blonde. What's Hachi's real name? Naruto asked. Shouldn't you be asking me that? A voice came from the window behind Naruto. Naruto turned around and looked at the man standing in the window, Hachi. Minato started chuckling behind his son as Naruto confronted the Anbu still sitting in the window. Naruto turned around to see why his father was laughing but turned back around. Kakashi-sensei? Naruto questioned. The Anbu laughed slightly and then his hand moved towards his mask. He removed it to reveal the slightly tilted hit I-8 and a blue mask distorting the lower half of the man's face. You're Kakashi-sensei. Naruto exclaimed, then turned to his father, why did you make Hachi my sensei, Tusan? Minato chuckled lightly, he's one of the only qualified people I trusted. Oh, Naruto replied, then walked over to where Kakashi was still perched on the window. Naruto motioned for him to come down to his height. Kakashi stepped down from the window and crouched in front of the blonde. What is Kakashi started, but before he could finish his sentence, a fist had collided with his face. Naruto. Minato shouted, jumping up from his chair. Ugh, Kakashi moaned as he grabbed his face. Where the hell were you? Naruto yelled, if you had been there, the whole thing with Mizuki would have never happened. I'm sorry, Naruto, Kakashi murmured as he looked up into those blue eyes that were becoming misty, I know I wasn't there to protect you. I was also deceived by Mizuki. It's not an excuse, and you are right, nothing would have happened if I had been there. Please forgive me, Naruto. It's okay, Hachi, Naruto whispered, I forgive you. I was just angry. Sorry for punching you. Seems like it's becoming a habit, Minato mumbled. Naruto shot him a look, then turned back to his new sensei. Kakashi held Naruto's shoulder, it's alright. Naruto only nodded in response. I will teach you to the best of my ability, along with Sasuke and Sakura. I will protect you three with my life, I hope you know that, Kakashi said. I do, thanks, Hachi, Naruto smiled. You don't get to call me that, Kakashi said. What? Naruto replied, a little hurt. It's Kakashi-sensei to you, Kakashi replied. Aw man, Naruto pouted. Minato sat and watched his son and his student throughout this discussion. Seeing how much Naruto matured made him feel like a decent father. It brought joy to his heart, knowing that Kakashi seemed to love Naruto like a little brother. It was almost like he had two sons. Naruto looked up to Kakashi, and now that he was Naruto's sensei, the little blonde would be in good hands. The door to Minato's office in the Hokage Tower creaked open and then slowly clicked shut. The blonde Hokage didn't look up because he knew precisely who had shuffled into his office. He chuckled softly as he heard a soft thud as the small couch in the corner gave way to the small 12-year-old boy who flopped down. He continued to be amused by the miniature version of himself as the said blonde groaned in pain. It continued to be silent in his office, aside from the sporadic grunts from the younger blonde. Then, when Minato finally looked up when the sound had ceased for a reasonable length of time, he noticed his son had fallen asleep in a strangely awkward position on the couch. Minato sighed, knowing he had two options as he looked at the clock. It was about time to go home. He could either wake Naruto up and never hear the end of it, or he could carry Naruto home, or he could flash home with Naruto. He was not above abusing the Hiraishin in such a way. Chuckling to himself, he stood up, gathered his belongings, and then strolled over to the sleeping genin. Minato kneeled and watched his son sleep for a few moments. These moments would not last much longer as Naruto grew up. A sweet expression on the elder's face slowly turned into a frown as he noticed that Naruto had never looked this peaceful. Being Konoha's Jinchuriki was surprisingly stressful for the young boy. He knew how hard it was on Kushina, but he had hoped Naruto wouldn't go through the same thing being the Yandame's son. He had hoped the village would see Naruto as a hero, a sacrifice being the next Jinchuriki, but that's not how the village saw him. They only saw him as a demon, a murderer. And there is nothing Minato could do to change that. Only Naruto would be able to change their minds. No law says the villagers couldn't have their own opinions. Naruto told him the villagers had never physically harmed him. Name-calling and empty threats aren't illegal, even if Minato wanted them to be. The shinobi who had hurt Naruto had already been punished. Naruto is going to have to prove himself to the villagers. But he knew Naruto could do precisely that. Minato sighed as he watched his son silently sleep. Then he wondered, if Naruto was going through this much, what kind of life would his son have if his wife had let him go through with his plan? Leaving Naruto an orphan? Would Kakashi or Jiraiya have stepped up? Would Tsunade or Sarutobi? Or would Naruto be alone? What kind of father would Naruto think he was, sealing the Kyuubi in him and then abandoning him? For the first time in a while, Minato could feel the guilt. The guilt for letting his wife die. The guilt for almost making his son an orphan. The guilt for making his son a Jinchuriki. Some father he was. He placed his hand on the side of Naruto's face, carefully ensuring he didn't wake him. How could he do such a thing to his son? Then it dawned on him. Because he knew Naruto was strong. The young blonde had already proven that to him several times. Naruto was strong, but he had a long way to go. Minato was going to make sure Naruto would get there. Maybe Naruto needed to get out of the village for a while. Get him away from the villagers for a few days. Minato took a deep breath. He would think about it for a while. He scooped up the younger and flashed home. Surprisingly, Naruto did not wake. Minato laid him on the couch outside the dining room. Minato headed to the kitchen and started making the one thing he knew Naruto would wake up for. Later on, Naruto heard noise from the kitchen, and upon waking up, the smell of homemade ramen filled his nose. Then it hit him. How did he get home? Shaking his head, Naruto scrambled to his feet and padded his way to the kitchen to find his father wearing the only thing that could make the flea on sight Yondaime Hokage look like a girly wimp. The pink apron. "Do-san," Naruto mumbled, still groggy from his nap. "Oh, Naruto, you're up." Minato turned around and gave his son a weak smile. "Good, I'm just about done. Go sit at the table, and I'll bring a couple of bowls." Naruto nodded and dragged himself to the table, plopping down in the same seat he'd sat in for years. The young genin propped his elbows on the table and rested his head on his palms. His eyes were still closed. He heard the slight clatter of a bowl being placed in front of him after a few shuffled footsteps from the kitchen. Then, those same footsteps were heard heading to the opposite side of the table. Another soft clink of a bowl was placed on the table, followed by the scratching noise of wood sliding on wood as his father pulled the chair out, then again when he scooted the chair back in. He even felt the slight vibrations when the bowls were placed on the table. His ears twitched slightly when he heard his father pick a pair of chopsticks and when the small wood sticks clinked on the edge of the bowl. "You're getting good, Naruto," Minato smiled. "However, you're still using too much chakra to lengthen your senses. Even I can sense it, though I'm not a sensory type. Now, open your eyes and eat." Naruto smiled and did as he was told. He sat up, picked up his chopsticks, and started eating his favorite food. Minato and his son sat in silence, eating their dinner. Even though it was silent, they were both content. Naruto finished his food before his father did. Naruto sat his chopsticks down and folded his hands in his lap. He closed his eyes and stretched his chakra out. The cough from his father indicated that he was using way too much chakra. His father and sensei had told him he had an extreme amount of chakra. Kakashi even once said that Naruto's chakra pools were almost 4 times the amount of his. If he pushed too much of his chakra out, he could choke someone on the chakra. It was that potent. Naruto took a deep breath and tried to suppress his chakra without impairing the senses he was picking up. It was challenging. Naruto took another deep breath. He was picking up mostly sound from the drip from the kitchen sink to air blowing from the fan in his father's office. The slight clinking from his father's bowl to the wind blowing through the tall grass in the backyard. The smells he was picking up, well, that's another story. Everything from the smell of ramen from their dinner to the grass in the backyard and even a slight burning smell from the kitchen stood out. Then something stood out to Naruto. It wasn't a smell or sound. He couldn't pin it as a taste. It wasn't something he felt. Since his eyes were closed, it wasn't something he was seeing. So what was it? It was familiar, yet distant, like he couldn't reach it, even though it was right before him. He opened his eyes to find his father staring back at him with the same blue eyes. Was it? Minato's clear blue eyes suddenly turned dark. He was worried. Naruto smiled to clear the worry off his father's face. "I sense something, but I can't quite place what it is. I don't know how to explain it." "You sense something?" Minato smiled suspiciously, giving Naruto a feeling in the pit of his stomach. "Yes," Naruto said slowly, "it's weird. It's like it's familiar, but I can't reach it. I can't touch it, but it's right in front of me." The younger blonde shook his head in frustration. Minato slightly chuckled, startling Naruto. "It's chakra." "Chakra?" Naruto repeated. "How can I sense someone else's chakra? I'm not that advanced yet. Even you said you can only sense chakra when there's a lot of it." Minato continued smiling. "Simple, you've inherited Uzumaki's sensory skills." "Sensory?" "Yes, being a sensory type means you can sense others' chakra no matter the amount of chakra. It's probably why you can pick up my chakra even though I'm not flaring it," Minato explained. "Wait," Naruto thought momentarily, "I don't understand. I'm a sensory type." Minato smiled. His son could be as dense as his wife. "Yes, Naruto. you are a sensory type. Well, at least I believe you are. No other 12-year-old genin can pick up chakra unless they have some sensory skills. But let's test it, shall we? Test it? Naruto questioned. Yes, stretch out your chakra without choking me, please, but particularly looking for that same sense you felt earlier, Minato instructed. Okay, Naruto nodded, then closed his eyes and pushed out his chakra at a semi-controlled rate. Minato sucked in a sharp breath as Naruto's chakra hit him like a ton of bricks, but he kept it together as he wanted his son to find his sensory skills. Naruto heard his father suck in a breath, so he tried to level it out as much as possible. Maybe I should bring Jiraiya back to help Naruto with his chakra control. With his amount and the seal, his chakra control is impeccable, but to everyone else, it is subpar. Naruto stretched out his chakra as much as he could without physically harming his father. Everything was sharper, clearer than it ever has been. But Naruto had something to focus on. Pushing all the smells and sounds that were rushing at him. He focused on that one thing that he was unable to place earlier. Now that he was looking for them, they were suddenly presenting themselves. All over the place, not just in front of him but all around him. It was insane. He pushed it out more. He wanted to know more. He continued pushing his chakra out farther to see whom he could find. Having this much chakra wouldn't be bad. He could stretch it out so far. He was able to sense even the smallest chakra signatures. He was so focused he didn't hear his father coughing and trying to get his attention. Naruto. Minato almost screamed, jerking Naruto out of his concentration and sucking in his chakra. Shit, Minato breathed. That's it. Jiraiya is coming back. I don't care if I have to force him. This kid is going to kill me. Sorry. Naruto replied sheepishly. It's not your fault, Naruto. You have a massive chakra pool, but that's not the only problem. I didn't tell you this because I didn't want to freak you out, but the seal I created for you allows a minuscule amount of Kyuubi's chakra to leak into yours continuously. It was a protection mechanism because the Kyuubi's chakra is harmful and I didn't want it to poison you, so to speak. So when that much of your chakra comes at someone, well, it's not the amount, it's the Kyuubi's chakra that lies within it, Minato explained. Oh, is that why I have such a large amount of chakra? Naruto asked. No, you have a large amount because you are in Uzumaki, Minato smiled, with the chakra you have right now, only about 1% of it is the Kyuubi's. However, it's hard on anyone else because they aren't accustomed to the demonic chakra. Oh, okay, Naruto replied, processing it. He's definitely Kushina's son. Anyways, let's not try that again until we help you increase your chakra control, Minato lightly laughed, but Naruto knew he was serious. What has Kakashi taught you about chakra control? Some, I guess, Naruto shrugged, we've learned tree climbing and started the basics of walking on water. However, it's not coming along very well. I see, well, just keep at it. Chakra control comes from practice, Minato said, anyways, I have a proposition for you. What is it? Naruto asked. You know that trip to Suna that I said I was going on but pushed it back a few weeks? Minato asked, and when Naruto nodded, he continued, well, I am leaving in a few days and I would like you to accompany me. Really? I get to leave the village. Naruto stood up. Minato laughed, yes Naruto. As long as it is okay with your sensei. Naruto gave his father an are you kidding me? Look, really? What? Minato blinked. He's your student. Naruto complained. Minato scratched the back of his head sheepishly, and you're also the Hokage. Naruto continued. Okay. Minato replied. Naruto rolled his eyes, picked up his and his father's bowls, and headed to the kitchen. Minato chuckled at Naruto's satirical frustration. He used to do the same to Kushina. He followed Naruto into the kitchen to help with cleanup. The two blondes cleaned up their dinner in silence. So when would we leave? Naruto asked, looking up at his father. 3 days, Minato replied without looking at his son. The tone of Minato's voice worried Naruto. Dusan, are you alright? Naruto asked. What? Minato was suddenly shaken and looked down at the other blonde. Are you alright? Naruto repeated. Oh yes, Minato smiled and ruffled the young one's hair, I was just thinking about your mom. I miss her. Oh, Naruto replied, I wish I had met her. You will one day, Minato smiled sadly. When? Naruto pleaded. Honestly, I don't know, Minato shook his head, I wish I did. Oh, okay, Naruto mumbled and silently finished the dishes. It had been a total of 4 months since Naruto had graduated, passed the bell test, and became a full shinobi. Although he was stuck on a team with Sasuke team and the Banshee Sakura, life wasn't all that bad. He had a great sensei and was learning a lot from both his father and sensei. He finally felt he was on the right path. He even learned he was a sensory type. Words can't even describe how excited Naruto was to tell Kakashi or how excited Kakashi was for him, even if Minato had warned Kakashi about Naruto trying to spread his chakra and almost causing those around him to choke. Kakashi knew he had to take Naruto's chakra control more seriously than the others. Naruto was preparing to leave for Suna soon after he received permission from his sensei. Naruto stood at the base of the tree in the center between Sasuke and Sakura, each at their own tree. Naruto made the ram hand sign and focused the chakra at the bottom of his feet. Even though they had mastered tree climbing long ago, they still needed to perfect it, so they didn't have to focus so much on getting the correct chakra. Once Naruto was satisfied with his collected chakra, he slowly walked up the tree. "Naruto, you're focusing too much on the chakra in your feet," Kakashi offered, standing off leaning against a tree, semi-watching his students, and semi-reading that familiar orange book. "It needs to become more natural, like you don't have to think about it." "Yes, sensei." Naruto replied without missing a beat. "Sakura, that's almost perfect. It's becoming more and more natural for you," Kakashi continued. "Sasuke, same thing as Naruto. You are putting in too much effort. Although you can do it, it's taking too much of your attention." "Yes, sensei," Sakura and Sasuke chimed. Once Naruto and his teammates had made it to the top of the tree for the 100th time that morning, Kakashi offered a break. The 4 members of Team 7 sat in a circle. Kakashi seemed to fall asleep, Naruto was stuffing his face, Sakura was eating quietly, and Sasuke was eating politely. The 4 stayed quiet until Sakura spoke up. "Naruto, is it true you are going to Suna?" Sakura asked, catching everyone's attention. "Yeah, Toussaint offered to take me along, and since I've never been out of the village, I thought it would be cool if I went," Naruto shrugged. "Well, that's cool," Sakura smiled. "I wonder if you'd be able to meet the Kazekage." "Sakura, you know about the cages?" Kakashi asked. "Yes, we learned a little bit about them in school. I was curious, so I went looking around," Sakura smiled as she explained to her sensei. "I see," Kakashi nodded. "Well, Toussaint did say it was a diplomatic mission," Naruto thought. "Maybe I will get to meet the Kazekage. I wonder if he is as scary as Toussaint can be." "Probably, he is the Kazekage," Sasuke replied sarcastically. Naruto rolled his eyes and finished his lunch. Kakashi excused his team for Naruto to prepare for his trip to Suna in the morning. The silver-haired shinobi caught up with his favorite student on his way home. "Kakashi-sensei?" Naruto called as the man showed up next to him. "Naruto, you know, the only reason I am letting you go to Suna is because Minato-sensei gave me permission to be one of the escorts for you and your father," Kakashi laughed. "Really? So you're coming with us? What about Sasuke and Sakura?" Naruto thought out loud. "Those 2 might be joining Team 10 for a C-rank escort mission to the Land of Waves," Kakashi shrugged. "What?" Naruto yelled, "I am missing our first C-rank mission." "Calm down, Naruto," Kakashi rolled his eyes at one of Naruto's many outbursts. "It's not 100% decided. The mission might be too much for a genin team. There have been reports that Missing Nin is after this client. So we will probably send a group of Chunin with him instead. So those 2 will probably be joining Team 8 for reconnaissance training." "Oh, good," Naruto smiled, "but you are coming with us." "Well, sort of," Kakashi scratched his head sheepishly. "I'll be there but in the shadows. I'm going to be an Anbu escort." "Oh, so I won't see you," Naruto pouted. "Nope, not if I do my job right," Kakashi laughed. "Plus, I think Minato-sensei wanted to use this trip as a father-son thing anyways, so I should stay out of the way." "Oh, okay then," Naruto replied. "He may teach you a new jutsu or 2, Kakashi hinted. "Really?" Naruto asked. "Maybe." Kakashi shrugged. "Like what?" Naruto said with a much too excited voice. "I don't know." Kakashi laughed. "I don't even know if he is. I just told him he should." "Oh," Naruto said slowly. "I'm sure he'll teach you something," Kakashi said as he ruffled Naruto's hair. "I hope so," Naruto smiled. Minato sat at his desk, finishing the paperwork for his trip to Suna tomorrow with Naruto. Although the flea on site Hokage would never admit it, he felt like a giddy little kid about this trip. He and Naruto haven't been able to spend much time with each other due to time constraints. It would be 3 days there and 3 days back, and Minato was planning on using that time to get Naruto to open up to him more and maybe teach Naruto a thing or 2. Minato was shaken from his thoughts when a little green and yellow frog jumped up on the desk. Minato narrowed his eye at the little amphibian, then laughed, knowing Jiraiya had sent the little guy. "Alright, give me the message, and you can go home," Minato chuckled at the little frog. "However," said little frog opened its mouth and spit out a sealed scroll. Minato grabbed the scroll and waved at the frog, indicating it was excused. He made several hand signs and unsealed the scroll. It was indeed a message from Jiraiya. "Baki. I would return to Konoha shortly to teach your brat a thing or 2 about chakra control and double check his seal and wetn't it. Give yourself credit, you created that damn thing in the first place. I'll be there shortly after you return from Suna. Keep your brat in line till then. The great Mount Myaboku sage. Jiraiya. Well, I guess I will just have to keep an eye on Naruto on our trip, Minato sighed. He had hoped he would accompany them on the trip and teach Naruto while they travel, as well as keep an eye on Naruto while he took care of the diplomatic business. Minato made a few hand signs and then flatly held his hand with the scroll on top. A few seconds later, the scroll caught fire and was destroyed. Having a fire affinity comes in handy when destroying documents as a Hokage. Minato furrowed his eyebrows and thought for a moment and then a grin came to his face. I guess that's what we can do while we travel, Minato chuckled lightly, then reached into one of the drawers in his desk and pulled out a few sheets of chakra paper. I wonder what affinity Naruto is. Kushina was water and fire, while I am fire, wind, and lightning. He could be any of those.